Chapter 1039. Sungin Xian's expression changed drastically. With his eyesight, he could immediately tell that this was the aftershock of an expert's attack. The attacker was at least an early-stage immortal emperor. Apart from General Liu, only Dong Lai Shun had such a cultivation. General Liu, who was sitting in the main hall of the city guard's mansion waiting for news, was similarly shocked when he felt the violent tremor. He got up and smashed the stone table in front of him. He looked at his men standing below and said in a low voice, "What's going on? Why did you cause such a huge commotion just to deal with an early-stage minor immortal cultivator? Are you afraid that Sungin Xian won't know?" Flustered and exasperated, he disappeared from the main hall in a flash. As soon as he appeared in the air, he saw Sungin Xian glaring at him angrily. Fortunately, Sungin Xian wasn't in the mood to deal with him. Saving Yu Qianzhou was his top priority, so he shot away in a flash. Golden umbrella. Dong Shunlai, who had chased into the cave, cried out. A large golden umbrella lay on its side on the ground. Yu Qianzhou was lying on the ground, hugging the handle of the umbrella and coughing. He coughed and coughed, mouthful after mouthful of blood. His entire body was enveloped by the faint golden light emitted by the golden umbrella. Although he looked heavily injured, there wasn't a single wound on his body. Golden umbrella. The people who chased after him also cried out. Although they hadn't seen the golden umbrella before, they had heard of it. It was one of the few defensive magic treasures in the immortal world. The shape of the umbrella was so obvious that anyone with a bit of experience would be able to tell that it was a golden umbrella. It's too late. Count himself lucky. Let's go. Dong Shunlai called out. They quickly shot towards the hole in the ground tens of meters away. They knew that they wouldn't be able to break the golden umbrella in a short time. If this dragged on, none of them would be able to escape from Sungin Xian. However, Dong Shunlai didn't give up. As he shot up, he threw a heavy punch at the golden umbrella below. F***CK. Yu Qianzhou, who was inside the golden umbrella, let out a strange cry. He had overestimated the power of the golden umbrella, thinking that he would be fine as long as he hid inside it. He didn't expect that the cultivation base of the early stage of the underworld emperor realm was too frightening. Even though it didn't break through the defense of the golden umbrella, Yu Qianzhou was shaken badly. If he were to be hit again, Yu Qianzhou really suspected that he would be jolted to death. How could he dare to take it head-on? Almost at the same time the heavy punch landed, he hid back into Utopia with his umbrella. Boom! The entire Twilight City shook violently. Almost at the same time, a huge hole appeared in the ground. Dong Shunlai didn't even bother to check if he had hit him. Just as he was about to escape into the sky, a mournful cry suddenly erupted from the large hole that had been blasted open. Sungin Xian, F***CK your ancestors, they want to run, stop them for your father, don't let a single one of them escape. Although the voice came from underground, the hysterical anger had faintly penetrated the ground. Everyone outside could hear it clearly. Everyone could tell that it was a roar with all his strength. He really isn't dead. Dong Shunlai's expression twitched. He wanted to turn back and beat him up a few more times, but there was no time. If he didn't escape now, when would he? Sungin Xian, who was rushing over, immediately understood what it meant when he heard, "They want to run." He wasn't angry at all about F***ing his ancestors. When he heard that Yu Qianzhou was cursing with such vigor, his spirit was lifted. That guy was obviously still alive and didn't have time to listen to what he said next. As his eyes flashed, he immediately saw 7 streams of light shooting out from the ravine hundreds of meters away. They scattered in a fan shape and fled. It was a smart idea. It all depended on who was unlucky or lucky. Bang! Sungin Xian's roar resounded through the world. He wanted to catch 7 people who were running away. He wasn't sure if he could, but he was sure that he could kill 7 dead people. Clang! A soft sound reverberated through the world. Even the air between heaven and earth trembled slightly. A dazzling white light came out from his sleeve and instantly illuminated the entire Twilight City. The people who were used to the darkness found it difficult to adapt to such a dazzling light. They subconsciously raised their sleeves to cover their faces or closed their eyes. They could only hear the roaring wind in their ears. Those who were close to the light were instantly swept away by the strong airflow. Dong Shunlai and the others who were scattering in all directions only saw a vast expanse of whiteness. They immediately sensed a powerful aura that blotted out the sky and covered the earth behind them. Looking back in fear, they saw a powerful beam of light sweeping towards them at an unbelievable speed. The aura that assaulted their faces was suffocating and forcefully poured into their lungs. They couldn't even block it. The 7 of them were scared out of their wits. Almost subconsciously, they used all of their cultivation to form a protective aura shield. However, the protective aura shield was easily destroyed like an eggshell. The 7 of them spat out a mouthful of blood and were instantly swallowed by the strong light that swept across. The 7 screams were swallowed as soon as they sounded. Many people who were watching from behind did not have time to escape. Suddenly, shrill screams rang out, but they were swallowed in the blink of an eye. Rumble. The earth trembled as if the sky and earth were about to be turned upside down. When the strong light disappeared, the world returned to calm. The people who were hiding in the air slowly opened their eyes, and suddenly became dumbfounded. Half of Twilight City, which covered an area of dozens of miles, had collapsed, starting from near the central square. Especially in the direction where Tsangyin Aksayan was facing. 1/3 of the city walls that were spread out in a fan shape were instantly smashed into powder. Not even a complete stone could be seen. On both sides of the fan shape were large collapsed houses. Dozens of mountains dozens of miles away had been razed to the ground. Smoke and smoke filled the air for a long time. Tsang Yinshin floated silently in the air, silently adjusting his aura. Pulling out the sword had consumed a lot of his cultivation base. He stared coldly in front of him, his right hand holding the sword horizontally in a slanted manner. This sword was not like an ordinary flying sword. The blade was longer and wider, and the temperature seemed to be very high. It was enshrouded in a dense white mist that curled up and dissipated. Finally, the blade slowly turned from white to clear, like a pool of autumn water. At a glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary sword. Otherwise, it would not have been able to withstand such a powerful force. Could this be the Heartless Palace's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style? Some whispers sounded, and countless horrified eyes looked at Tsangyin Aksayan. They were filled with disbelief. They could not imagine that the power of one person could burst out such a powerful force. Looking at the dust-filled area in front of him, there was not a single figure to be seen. From the miserable cries earlier, it was obvious that besides the 7 people who had fled, there were countless others who had been annihilated by this sword strike. In fact, Tsangyin Aksayan did not want to kill innocent people, but after the power of that sword was released, he could not control the killing range. He would not stop until the power was completely exhausted. Shen Yu was dumbfounded. He did not expect to have such a powerful master by his side these days. This was the sect's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style. He Xingguang could not suppress the excitement on his face. He had long heard that the sect leader Wang Qing's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style was extraordinary, but he had never had the chance to see it for himself. It turned out that its power was so terrifying. General Liu looked at Tsangyin Aksayan with a gloomy expression. He could not suppress the chill in his heart. Although his armored subordinates were flying behind him, he knew that no matter how many of them there were, they would not be able to block that sword. In the cave below, Yu Qianqiu had just flashed out of the deep pit when he heard a thunderous roar of slaughter pushing into the distance. Even the ground was violently trembling, and the commotion was extremely frightening. When the commotion completely disappeared, he discovered that more than half of his body had been buried by the collapsed soil. He quickly flashed out, rubbed his chest, and coughed out another mouthful of blood. He spread his arms, and the scattered purple flame-flying swords all drilled out of the soil and returned to his body. Then, he looked around and quickly sank into the ground, entering a spherical space a few hundred meters underground. He saw Mu Bing lying on the ground, applying medicine on the wound on his stomach. He was still moaning in pain. "Mu Bing, I'm so happy to see you again." Yu Qianqiu took a step forward, raised his foot, and directly stepped on Mu Bing's stomach, which was covered with both hands. Mu Bing's 10 fingers, as well as the medicine bottle, were stomped into the cracked belly. Blood immediately spurted out of the slightly healed wound. "Ah!" The miserable scream was shrill and piercing, making one's hair stand on end. Yu Qianqiu was not moved at all. He forcefully twisted his foot again until both of Mu Bing's palms were completely stuffed into his cracked belly. Then, he sneered and said, "Didn't you say that there would be a time for me to cry? I'm waiting for you to explode your dantian." When? Mu Bing was in so much pain that he could not catch his breath. How could he have the guts to destroy his body and soul? He looked at Yu Qianqiu in horror, gasping for breath, and said, "Yu Qianqiu, spare me, as long as you let me go. I'll do anything in the future. With Wu Xiong's help, no one in the immortal world will dare to touch you." "Who does Wu Xiong think he is?" Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. His right hand pulled out a long sword made of azure fire. He waved the tip of the sword in front of Mu Bing's eyes and said, "Tell me the truth. Why did you come to the netherworld this time?" He still thought that Mu Bing was hiding some secret, but at this time, how could Mu Bing still dare to say that he was here to kill him? But in this moment of hesitation, Yu Qianqiu swung the long sword in his hand and chopped off both of Mu Bing's legs, starting from the ankles. Ugh! Mu Bing's forehead was instantly covered in sweat. His body twisted slightly, and the blood in his abdomen flowed even faster. "Still talking back to me?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and swung the long sword in his hand again, chopping off 2 more legs from the knees. "Ah!" Mu Bing screamed and replied impatiently, "Kill you, hunt you down. I came to hunt you down. Hunt me down. You think you can find so many netherworld experts to hunt me down?" Yu Qianqiu moved the sword in his hand and the tip hovered over Mu Bing's eyes. He said indifferently, "Without Wu Xiong's support, you wouldn't have been able to find so many netherworld experts to help you. Wu Xiong wouldn't go against the immortal emperor just to kill me, right? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll gouge out one of your eyeballs. Do you believe me?" Chapter 1040. Mu Bing's pupils shrank as the blade swayed slightly in front of his eyes. He had no doubt that Yu Qianqiu was joking. If he was unhappy, Yu Qianqiu's sword would gouge out one of his eyeballs. He hurriedly said, "I deliberately told Wu Xiong that you had once pursued Tianzhao, and that the relationship between the two of you had always been ambiguous. This aroused Wu Xiong's jealousy and made him use his power to help me kill you." "Ah!" Yu Qianqiu choked and was speechless. Let's not talk about whether or not he had an ambiguous relationship with Mu Tianzhao. Even if he did, was this something that a father could say? Not to mention that he didn't. He really couldn't imagine that a father would slander his own daughter's reputation like this. Not to mention him, even the dead Dong Shunlai would never have thought that the problem he couldn't figure out before was actually caused by Wu Xiong's jealousy. It should be known that sometimes, no matter how shrewd a man was, he couldn't stand his woman having an ambiguous relationship with another man. Because of this, he would often do something impulsive that he would regret. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. He didn't think that Mu Bing was lying. He slowly let out a breath and said, "I give up. You're even slandering your own daughter. Let me ask you, does Mu Tianzhao know that you came to kill me?" "No. Wu Xiong and I hid it from her. If she knew, she definitely wouldn't agree, Mu Bing replied hurriedly. Mu Bing replied hurriedly. He blurted it out without thinking, fearing that he would be killed if he didn't answer in time. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou finally felt a little better. Fortunately, he didn't misjudge Mu Tianzhao. It should be known that in his eyes, Mu Tianzhao had always been a woman who was not inferior to men. She wouldn't be so narrow-minded. It would be really disgusting if he met a family of ingrates. The sword in his hand moved away from Mu Bing's eyeballs. He patted Mu Bing's face with the blade and said, "I just can't figure it out. How did I offend you? How could you be so vengeful? Even though I'm in the underworld, you still chase after me at all costs. Why?" Hee hee. Mu Bing suddenly laughed miserably. He laughed so hard that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He said in a hoarse voice, "Although I'm incompetent, how can I not see through my daughter's thoughts after raising her for so many years? Who in the world knows her better than I do? Back then, when the two of you left the divine ruin realm, I could tell that Tian Jiao had fallen in love with you. If the two of you were a couple, it would be fine. But now she is married to Wu Xiong." Who is Wu Xiong? He was someone who could be considered powerful even in the immortal palace. It was one thing for the lass to go to the World Chamber of Commerce to support you, but she even invited you to the wedding. What kind of occasion was that? It's too obvious. I'm scared. I'm afraid that the lass will do something impulsive and ruin her hard-won happiness. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He somewhat understood. No wonder this old dog deliberately humiliated him at Mu Tianzhao's wedding. So this was the reason. The sword patted his face again and said, "But you don't have to tarnish your own daughter's reputation. Aren't you afraid that Wu Xiong's misunderstanding will deepen and ruin your daughter's happiness? As long as you're dead, the lass will stop thinking. I believe that the lass will have a good relationship with Wu Xiong, because the lass's chastity is the best bargaining chip." Mu Bing suddenly roared with a ferocious expression, "And the most important point is that I can't stand the sight of you. I, Mu Bing, have suffered for so many years in the immortal world before I could make a name for myself. Why is it that you, a poor boy with nothing, can live better than me? It would be fine if you had a good birth and a good background. But you were just a subordinate of my 4 Links Chamber of Commerce. Damn it. I'm afraid that what you said before was just an excuse to comfort yourself. It's true that you're jealous of me. You dog, who do you think you are to compare yourself with me? Who asked you to be so arrogant?" Mu Bing's right eyeball flew out with a flick of the sword in his hand. "Who asked you to look down on me?" The sword in his hand flicked again, and Mu Bing's left eyeball popped out again. "Ah! Yu Qianzhou, you!" Before Mu Bing could finish roaring in pain, Yu Qianzhou stabbed his sword into his mouth and chewed his tongue. He sneered and said, "Who asked you to shout at me?" Mu Bing's head tilted and he fainted from the pain. Just as Yu Qianzhou pulled out his sword, he suddenly heard someone shouting, "Yu Qianzhou, where are you?" He couldn't help but be stunned. He thought that it was Mu Bing, whose tongue had been chewed up, who was talking. After listening carefully, he realized that it was Ash Gray Cloud Xian's voice. He immediately looked up and muttered, "This old man has such a good voice. I can still hear him even though I'm hiding so deep underground." With a swing of the sword in his hand, he chopped off the head of the unconscious Mu Bing. Then, he put away the blue fire-flying sword and bent down to grab the bun on Mu Bing's head. Then, he quickly burrowed into the soil above his head. Ash Gray Cloud Xian, who had already burrowed into the half-collapsed underground cave, shouted frantically. He was cleaning up the collapsed area while searching for Yu Qianzhou. He had clearly heard Yu Qianzhou's scolding voice earlier, so why wasn't there any reaction now? If Yu Qianzhou died, he would have to prepare to hide in the netherworld and escape for his life. He wouldn't be able to return to the immortal realm for the rest of his life. Not only would he have to pay back the passionless palace, he would also have to face the constant pursuit. How he wished that Yu Qianqiu would scold him again. It didn't matter how vicious the scolding was, as long as he wasn't dead. Suddenly, ash-gray cloud Xian's sharp divine sense detected some movement in the collapsed area in front of him. He was delighted to see Yu Qianqiu bursting out from the ground, holding a bloody head in his hand. It was Mu Bing's. Ash-gray cloud Xian quickly suppressed the pleasant surprise on his face and said with a cold expression, "Did you kill Mu Bing?" However, he was astonished inwardly. Even after being attacked by several meditation practitioners, including another world emperor at the preliminary stage, they still couldn't kill him. It was a miracle that this guy was still alive. Half of Yu Qianqiu's body was covered in blood. He shook the head in his hand and said with a cold smile, "Do you think he came for me? You are very wrong. I have just interrogated him. The person he wanted to kill is indeed me, but it was Wu Xiong who played tricks behind the scenes. The real target is your heartless palace. I don't know how your heartless palace offended Wu Xiong. Damn it, he wanted to kill me to use the powerful force of the immortal palace to eradicate your heartless palace. I am so unlucky. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have asked the heartless palace to protect me. Don't talk nonsense here. Do you think I will believe your provocation?" Ash-gray cloud Xian was shocked, but he still said coldly, "It is you who offended Mu Bing. Mu Bing is here for revenge. Touch your conscience when you say this." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and lifted Mu Bing's head. He sneered, "Let's not talk about the others. Do you think he can find an early-stage underworld emperor to help him? In fact, you know that Wu Xiong is behind this. Without Wu Xiong's support, it is still a question whether he can come to Twilight City." Humph. Ash-gray cloud Xian didn't care. You have the immortal emperor's decree on you. Wu Xiong doesn't have the guts to oppose the immortal emperor. That's right. Although Mu Bing has confessed, I don't understand what you said. Wu Xiong is a member of the immortal palace. Why would he take the lead to oppose the immortal emperor? Could it be that he was tired of living? I don't get it, I don't get it. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. Suddenly, he was startled and revealed a suspicious expression. "I say, old Ash-gray, do you think the immortal palace doesn't want your heartless palace to grow, so they sent me here to compose a song?" In reality, it was all planned. They just wanted to sacrifice me to find an excuse to take care of the heartless palace in the open. Ash-gray cloud Xian couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. He even suspected that the immortal palace was aware of sect master Wang Qing's secret, so they planned this. However, he thought of a suspicious point and calmed down in the blink of an eye. He snorted, "Don't try to sow discord here. You were the one who wanted me to protect you, so the immortal palace gave the decree to the heartless palace. Could it be that you have already colluded with the immortal palace and even sacrificed your life to be loyal to the immortal palace? It would have been fine if you didn't say it, but I'm even more suspicious now." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his blood-stained chin. "You know about the Great Bright Wheel, right? What does this have to do with the Great Bright Wheel?" Ash-gray cloud Xian squinted his eyes and asked. "The immortal emperor ordered me to compose a song, and the person who passed the decree was the Great Bright Wheel. What's so strange about that? The Great Bright Wheel is in charge of the Immortal World Commerce Alliance, and the illusionary Immortal City is his territory. Your World Commerce Alliance is in his territory, so it's normal to find him to pass the decree," Ash-gray cloud Xian said calmly. "That's normal, but now that I think about it, the most abnormal thing is that he was the one who asked me to come out to collect new things. When I was worried that we would become enemies and that you would secretly plot against me, he suggested that I find you to protect me. He said that you have mastered the Heartless Palace's 3 swords into 1 sword drawing style. With your protection, few people in the world can touch me, so it's definitely safe." Yu Qianqiu put his head behind his back and said suspiciously, "And I was worried that you wouldn't agree, but he told me to find you first. If you didn't agree, he would think of a way to ask for a decree from the Immortal Palace and have the Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qin pressure you. At that time, you would have no choice but to agree. Because he is friends with Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu, I believed him. You know what happened next. Ash-gray Cloud Xayan was shocked when he heard this, and he gritted his teeth as he muttered to himself, so this was all a trap that was already planned, F***CK. I only realized it now. I clearly knew that if I begged you, you definitely wouldn't agree to protect me, but I was still foolishly tricked by him to find you, thinking that I could disgust you. Now that I think about it, the advantage of doing this is to get rid of their suspicion. It's easy to announce to the public that I begged you but couldn't, so I begged the Immortal Palace. And for the Immortal Emperor's wedding, the Immortal Palace had no choice but to fulfill my request and send a decree to the Heartless Palace. Chapter 1041. At this point, Yu Qianqiu suddenly took out his empty hand from his back and slapped his thigh. He exclaimed in shock, "Oh my God!" The Chamber of Commerce's Great Bright Will Master, the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong, and they even mobilized an early-stage Underworld Emperor expert in the Underworld. Even the Dark Army is involved. Could it be that such a large force is working together just to kill me, Yu Qianqiu? What a joke. They think too highly of me, Yu Qianqiu. He frowned and turned to Zhang Yunxin, who was frowning in thought. He hit his chest with the back of his hand and asked, "Old Zhang, help me analyze this. You see, such a large force is definitely not something an ordinary person can control. Do you think that Immortal Emperor Jin Tai is behind all this? Otherwise, who would be able to mobilize these people?" Your expression changed. Could I have guessed correctly? Is it really against your Heartless Palace? Then I'm being wronged. Zhang Yunxin's expression did change. After being analyzed by Yu Yang's vicious mouth and the facts laid out in front of him, it was hard not to believe it. He couldn't help but connect all the things that had happened from start to finish and think about it. The Immortal Emperor suddenly issued a decree to a small world Chamber of Commerce master to have him compose for the Immortal Emperor's wedding. This was an unimaginable matter, and many people still couldn't understand it. Then, the Great Bright Will instigated Yu Qianqiu to seek his protection. This was believable. Unless Yu Qianqiu was an idiot, he would be able to figure it out even if he used his ass to think. It was absolutely impossible for Yu Qianqiu to agree. If it wasn't for someone's instigation, if Yu Qianqiu really wanted Yu Fujian to protect him, he could have directly asked the Immortal Palace for help. Why did he have to go around in a roundabout way to humiliate himself and then ask the Immortal Palace for help? Was there something wrong with his brain? With this scoundrel's craftiness, he definitely wouldn't do such a stupid thing. The Great Bright Will clearly wanted to get rid of the suspicion that the Immortal Palace was behind this. At the same time, the sect happened to monitor the Great Bright Will visiting the World Chamber of Commerce several times. Normally, it would be difficult for a large sect to invite him, let alone visit the World Chamber of Commerce so frequently. After he refused, the Immortal Palace used Yu Qianqiu's mouth to issue a decree to the Heartless Palace to force him to protect Yu Qianqiu. The most ridiculous thing was that when something happened to a minor character like Yu Qianqiu, the entire Heartless Palace would be implicated. The reason was that he was afraid he wouldn't protect Yu Qianqiu and would miss the Immortal Emperor's wedding ceremony. The decree was equivalent to the Heartless Palace falling into a trap. The rest would be easy. They just had to kill Yu Qianqiu. The reason why they were beating around the bush was that the Immortal Palace wanted to find a justifiable excuse to attack the Heartless Palace. Otherwise, they were afraid that the sects in the celestial world would be in a state of panic, which would be detrimental to their rule. It should be known that the previous few top sects in the celestial world had been eliminated by the Immortal Palace with a justifiable excuse. The higher-ups of the Heartless Palace, led by sect master Wang Qin, had already expected this. However, they didn't expect it to be this fast. The immortal palace was already prepared to act, hee hee. Looks like I've really been implicated by the heartless palace. Yu Qianqiu stared at Grey Cloud Xan and gritted his teeth. In his heart, he was secretly apologizing to Great Bright Luan. In order to increase his credibility, he hoped that Great Bright Luan would understand. At the same time, he felt that Great Bright Luan should be able to understand. Anyway, now that things had come to this, he understood that he wasn't just Grey Cloud Xian's enemy. The Heartless Palace wouldn't let him go either. Thus, he took this opportunity to provoke the Heartless Palace. If he could force the Heartless Palace to rebel, then the Immortal Palace would help him take care of this troublesome matter. The Heartless Palace wouldn't just sit and wait for death. They were a bunch of powerful people. Implicated you? Humph. If I didn't save you, you'd be dead. Grey Cloud Xan quickly regained his composure. He didn't admit or deny that the Immortal Palace was targeting the Heartless Palace. He naturally wouldn't spread this kind of thing. Instead, he stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. You killed Wu Xiong's father-in-law. You should think about how to explain this to Wu Xiong. What do I have to explain to him? Who saw me kill Mu Bing? Yu Qianqiu raised Mu Bing's head and sneered. It was clearly those people from Dongshan who killed Mu Bing. Don't act like nothing happened. You and I both know the reason behind this. The Immortal Palace must also know that we killed him. Not only will framing me benefit, but it will also buy time for the Heartless Palace to prepare. As long as the cover isn't lifted, the Immortal Palace won't have a legitimate reason to act against the Heartless Palace. You should be thanking me. Although he said this, only he knew the real reason. Once the news of Mu Bing's death reached the immortal world, as long as Wu Xiong wasn't stupid, he should know that Wu Xiong dared to kill his father-in-law. Wu Xiong would naturally understand that Wu Xiong had something on him. If Wu Xiong still acted rashly, then he would try and see what the consequences would be if the immortal emperor found out. Wu Xiong should know which was more important. Currently, the one who posed the least threat was Wu Xiong. Hearing this, Zhangyan Xian's eyes flickered. Although he didn't say anything, he understood that at the moment, this was indeed the best way to prevent the Immortal Palace from directly acting against the Heartless Palace. Just as Yu Qianqiu said, it could delay the outbreak of the crisis and allow the Heartless Palace to make more preparations. After letting out a slight sigh, he looked at Yu Qianqiu, whose chest and mouth were covered in blood. He frowned slightly and said, "You're injured like this, are you all right?" To him, Yu Qianqiu couldn't have anything happen to Yu Qianqiu, especially after he thought he knew the truth about the Immortal Palace targeting the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianqiu touched the blood scab on his chin and smiled sheepishly. It's not the first time I've been injured. Injuries, I get used to them. I recover quickly. I'm almost healed. Zhangyan Xian was stunned. He looked him up and down with some disbelief. Anyone who was beaten to the point of vomiting so much blood, how could they recover so quickly? Seeing that he didn't believe him, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to reveal the miraculous effects of the golden bead to him. He quickly shook the head in his hand and changed the topic. Let's go. It's time to let the people outside know the truth. He flashed towards the exit, and Zhangyan Xian followed. After the two of them flashed out of the ground, Yu Qianqiu flew directly to the broken statue standing in the center of Twilight City, ignoring the surprised and doubtful gazes around him. He landed on the top of the giant statue, looked around, and immediately stared speechlessly at the ruins of half of the city. After a while, he tilted his head and looked at Zhangyan Xian, who had landed beside him. He guessed that this old man had pulled out that shocking sword to scare people again. Withdrawing his gaze from Zhangyan Xian, he raised the head in his hand to the crowd and shouted at General Liu, "General Liu, your men colluded with Dong Shunlai and the others to kill the people of the immortal world. The heads are here. How do you explain that?" Humph. Ridiculous. Who can testify to that? General Lu gritted his teeth and said, I suspect that you were the one who killed him and framed my men. Lu! Tsangyan Aksayan shouted coldly. His right hand touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist. He took a step forward and said, You took Mu Bing and the others out of the prison ahead of time, and Yu Qianqiu was locked in a cage by you. I only rescued him from the cage just now. How did he kill Mu Bing? Although the 7 criminals have already been killed by my sword, their frantic escape is obvious to everyone. Don't tell me you still want to lie through your teeth. Justice is clear. If you dare to brazenly accuse others, I, Tsangyan Aksayan, will not let you off even if I have to die. Yu Qianqiu was very pleased to hear this. His previous persuasion work hadn't been in vain. This was the first time that this old man had taken the initiative to cooperate with him. Furthermore, his reasoning was so reasonable and well-founded that Yu Qianqiu's suspicions were cleared. Now, no one would believe that he was the culprit except for the mastermind behind the scenes. However, General Lu was one of the masterminds behind the scenes. He naturally knew that no one else could have killed Mu Bing. There was no one else but Yu Qianqiu. However, the inside story could not be made public. Moreover, Tsangyan Aksayan was clearly threatening him, so he could only suffer in silence. He secretly clenched his teeth and said slowly, after hearing Master Tsang's words, This reminds me that Yu Qianqiu is indeed still locked in a cage and unable to commit murder. Perhaps there is some inside story behind this. I will definitely get to the bottom of this. Many of the onlookers thought that there was a grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Mu Bing and thought that it was very likely that Yu Qianqiu had killed Mu Bing. However, even General Lu said that Yu Qianqiu could not commit murder while locked in a cage, so they immediately dispelled this idea. For a moment, they began to wonder if the Onyx army had colluded with outsiders to commit murder. But why? Tsangyan Aksayan snorted coldly and said nothing more. Both sides knew that this matter would be investigated, but there was no time limit at all. It would definitely be investigated until the end. However, neither he nor Yu Qianqiu wanted to be entangled in this matter as long as they were not implicated. Master Tsang. General Lu, who was floating in the air ahead, suddenly spoke again. In addition to the 7 murderers who were killed, more than half of Twilight City has been destroyed, and so many cultivators of the immortal and netherworld have been killed by you. Although it was an unintentional mistake, this is my territory. How do you expect me to explain to my superiors that such a big thing has happened? Tsangyan Aksayan immediately narrowed his eyes and stared at him. It was obvious that the other party had suffered a loss just now and was now looking for trouble. In the immortal and netherworld, it had always been the strong who had the final say. Those who had connections, ability, and background would naturally settle the score with him afterward. Those who did not have the ability could only blame it on their bad luck. There was no need for him to stand up for them. However, this was someone else's territory, and he had indeed destroyed Twilight City. If someone insisted on making things difficult for him, it would be understandable. What do you want? Tsangyan Aksayan said indifferently. General Lu glanced at Yu Qianqiu meaningfully and then replied, Master Tsang, it was an unintentional mistake, but I dare not make the decision on my own. I have to report back to my superiors and wait for their instructions before making a decision. Before that, please cooperate with me and don't leave Twilight City for the time being. Otherwise, it will be difficult to find you. Chapter 1042. As he said this, the thousands of soldiers of the Onyx army behind him slowly formed a battle formation and floated in the air. This was a blatant threat. Previously, Tsangyan Aksayan had threatened him, so he immediately retaliated. In fact, he did not want to threaten Tsangyan Aksayan. Who knew if Tsangyan Aksayan would attack him? That was a matter of life and death. However, if he did not regain his lost face, he would not only lose his own face, but also the face of the entire Onyx army. He could not afford to bear such a heavy responsibility. Of course, there was another reason. Yu Qianzhou secretly cursed. What did Sangyin Exayan killing people and destroying Twilight City have to do with him? He immediately guessed the intention of General Liu. The other party obviously saw that the assassination attempt on him had failed. With Sangyin Exayan present, it would not be good for him to act on his own. He needed to ask for instructions on how to proceed next, so he left him behind. The night wind blew like a tide, and the sound of waves in the distance was faint. The two standing on the high afterimage looked at each other. It was not difficult to force their way out of the encirclement of the Onyx army, but the consequences were serious. This was tantamount to going against the entire Onyx army of the underworld. At this point, they could only take one step at a time. After the two secretly discussed, Sangyin Exayan could not show weakness. Yu Qianzhou then laughed and said, "We were going to stay in Twilight City for a few days, but General Liu had better hurry up and ask for instructions. We will not wait after that." "That's good. Guards!" General Liu turned back and shouted, "Send 100 capable men to protect them so that no one will disturb them." After saying this, he flashed back. The thousands of soldiers of the Onyx army in the air also left one after another, leaving only 100 of them. Everyone knew that the protection was fake, but the surveillance was real. The crowd gradually dispersed. Half of Twilight City had been destroyed. Many people had to deal with the aftermath and ask for instructions from the higher-ups on how to deal with this matter. Of course, it was not that everyone had no temper, but because Sangyin Exayan's sword was too terrifying. Otherwise, Sangyin Exayan would have been surrounded and beaten up. "Old Song, the hidden dragon manor's territory seems to have been destroyed by you. Where should we go?" Yu Qianzhou looked around the ruins and smiled bitterly. "Old Song, it seems like you've destroyed the hidden dragon manor's territory. Speak of the devil." Ding Xiang, who was in a sorry state, flew over and stood in front of the two. He stared at Sangyin Exayan and said through gritted teeth, "Sangyin Exayan, nearly half of my disciples died under your sword. Even I almost lost my life. How do you explain this?" He was relatively unlucky. Because he did not want to get involved in the matters of these two people, he did not come out to watch the show for fear of being implicated. In the end, he was almost killed by a single sword strike from Sangyin Exayan. Fortunately, he was lucky enough to escape. It wasn't that he felt sorry for his dead disciples, but that he wanted to vent his anger. "You are also clear about the matter. It is useless for me to explain. If there is anything, you can ask your hidden dragon villa to discuss it with my heartless palace. I don't have time to talk to you endlessly. If you continue to be so long-winded, I don't mind killing one more." Sangyin Exayan snorted coldly and revealed his dominance. Ding Xiang immediately lost his temper. At the side, Yu Qianzhou looked at Ding Xiang and chuckled. He thought to himself, "Aren't you looking for trouble for yourself?" He Jinquang and Shen Yu quickly flew over. He Jinquang's face was abnormally excited. He did not feel a headache because Sangyin Exayan had caused trouble. Instead, he cupped his hands respectfully and said, "High Priest, I have already ordered my disciples to clean up the rooms. There are too many people here. Why don't you come to our place to rest?" The Heartless Palace's business was located in the opposite direction of the destroyed area, so it was fine. They could only do this. Under He Jinquang's lead, the few of them quickly flew to the Heartless Palace's business. Ding Xiang, who was in a sorry state, was left speechless. Around the Heartless Palace's business, the hundreds of soldiers of the Dark Underworld army were blatantly monitoring the surroundings. After He Jinquang personally arranged their accommodations, Sangyin Exayan took the opportunity when Yu Qianzhou led Shen Yu to check the living environment to signal He Jinquang. The two of them were about to leave when Yu Qianzhou, who was strolling around with his hands behind his back, looked back and smiled. He had roughly guessed what Sangyin Exayan was going to do. He immediately shouted, "Elder He, please wait." The two of them stopped and turned around. He Jinquang smiled in confusion and said, "What orders does sect leader you have?" Yu Qianqiu walked over with Mu Bing's head in his hand. He said, "Elder He, please arrange for someone to send this to Wu Xiong of the Immortal Palace. Tell him that I passed it to him. Also, help me pass a message to Wu Xiong and his wife. Tell them that my ability is limited and I could not save Mu Bing's life. I could not even keep his corpse intact. I am ashamed that only his head was left." This. He Jinquang immediately looked at Sangyan Axian awkwardly. What a joke. How could he interfere in something like this? Sangyan Axian fell silent for a moment. Then, he frowned and said, "I can arrange for someone to bring Mu Bing's head over for you, but to pass a message. Why don't you leave a message in a jade archive and pass it to Wu Xiong and his wife along with Mu Bing's head?" Yu Qianqiu understood He Jinquang's concerns. He chuckled and took out a jade archive. He wrote a few words on it, then passed it to He Jinquang along with Mu Bing's head. Since Sangyan Axian had instructed him to do so, He Jinquang could only reluctantly accept these two items. Inside the secret chamber of Unrequited Love Palace's branch, Sangyan Axian solemnly laid down a soundproof enchantment the moment he entered. Then, he took out a jade archive. After some thought, he wrote quite a few things on it. After he was done, he carefully checked it a few times. Then, he added a special restriction of Unrequited Love Palace onto the jade archive. He Jinquang's eyelids twitched. He knew that this restriction was a self-destruct restriction. If someone didn't know how to undo it and forcefully opened it, the contents of the jade archive would immediately self-destruct. Even he, an elder, wouldn't be able to undo it. Sangyan Axian handed the jade archive over and said in a deep voice, "Bring some people with you and return to the immortal realm immediately. You must personally deliver this jade archive to the sect master. Remember, it can only be handed over to the sect master. It cannot fall into anyone else's hands. If you run into any trouble along the way, you can say that you were entrusted by Yu Qianqiu to deliver Mu Bing's head to Wu Xiong. If you run into any trouble that you can't solve, destroy this jade archive immediately. It cannot fall into anyone else's hands. This is an important matter. Do you understand?" If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't send messages across the two realms, and that he couldn't leave this place for the time being, he wouldn't have handed over the contents of this jade archive to someone else. He Jinquang's expression turned solemn. To think that this was something that couldn't be handed over and could only be presented directly to the sect master, Unrequited Love Palace. He didn't even need to think to know that it was something extremely important. He immediately nodded and said, "Don't worry, High Deacon. I know what to do." After Sangyan Axian reminded him again, the two of them left the secret room together. He Jinquang then quickly arranged the matters here. He himself picked dozens of people and quickly flew out of Twilight City. They weren't the only ones who left Twilight City at the same time. Since the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld couldn't send messages directly, the other sects had sent people back to the Immortal Realm to report what had happened here. In this way, everyone could travel together on the way, reducing a lot of risk. Yu Qianqiu leaned against the stone window. After seeing He Jinquang leave with his people, he turned around and walked at Sangyan Axian, who had just entered the room, as if nothing had happened. He was a little puzzled and said, "I didn't expect so many sects to send people to guard Twilight City. I wonder what kind of business everyone is doing here." Sangyan Axian didn't hide anything and told him directly. Since the Netherworld had a rule since ancient times, people from the Netherworld were not allowed to do business with the Immortal Realm. Twilight City was actually a black market trading center under the command of the army of the Netherworld. People from the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld had to abide by the rules if they wanted to do business here. The so-called rules were because there was the protection of the army of the Netherworld here, so people could trade with peace of mind. Therefore, protection fees must be paid. If they didn't pay, they wouldn't be able to survive here. As for what to trade between the immortal realm and the netherworld, what the netherworld lacked the most were all kinds of weapons and magic treasures. It had to be known that the netherworld was vast and had a large population. There were often fights and killings, so the consumption of weapons and magic treasures was a huge number. Unfortunately, weapons and magic treasures must be refined by controlling fire. However, fire was the natural nemesis of meditation, which became the biggest obstacle for meditation cultivators to refine magic treasures and weapons. However, these obstacles were not a problem at all for the cultivators of the immortal realm. If you meditation cultivators want it, we can refine it for you. Of course, we can't give it to you for free. Naturally, you have to pay the price. Therefore, the netherworld was extremely rich in reserves, and the spirit stones that the cultivators of the immortal realm needed became the best trading item. At the same time, you could find some rare minerals and metals in the immortal realm in the netherworld, which were all needed for refining magic treasures. A buyer and a seller's market was formed. Those who could do business in Twilight City were some of the top sects among the tens of thousands of sects in the immortal realm. As for those small sects, it was a problem whether they could reach here safely. They were afraid that before the transaction was completed, the things in their hands would have been snatched away. Therefore, those small sects and small merchants only dared to look for business opportunities not too far from the entrance to the netherworld. But then again, the small sects and small chambers of commerce almost didn't have anything good in their hands. The various forces in the netherworld didn't care about their things, and the rich reserves of spirit stone mines in the netherworld were mostly controlled by the various forces. Those small sects could only find some scattered small forces or loose cultivators to do business with. This was a vicious cycle. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slowly and frowned. If that's the case, wouldn't the big refining sects in the immortal realm, such as the mythical fire palace, make a fortune? Tsangyan Aksayan couldn't help but sneer. Making a fortune depends on one's ability. As long as the mythical fire palace has the guts to eat it alone, no one will say anything. Yu Qianqiu was startled and thought about it. If the mythical fire palace cut off everyone's source of wealth, it would be strange if everyone did not join forces to kill it. However, thinking of the big sects making a fortune here, he couldn't help but feel a little itchy. He rubbed his hands and asked, I wonder if the World Chamber of Commerce can send some people to Twilight City to do business. Chapter 1043. There's nothing you can't do, as long as you have the ability to settle any trouble in the underworld. But Tsangyan Aksayan looked out the window and said lightly, you should think of a way to get through this first. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's heart immediately stopped itching. His expression twitched. He wasn't afraid of trouble, but he couldn't make a fortune here if he didn't settle the trouble with the Onyx army. After all, this was the territory of the Onyx army, and a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. When he was imprisoned, he thought that he didn't have to worry about the Great Ming Wheel's owner token. He could ask the supreme commander of the Onyx army, Madame Hei Qi, for help. But now, it seemed that he didn't know if Madame Hei Qi had intervened in this matter, so he couldn't rush to take out the Great Ming Wheel's owner token. However, he had to solve this problem. First, he had to continue looking for Bai Changchun in the underworld. Even if he didn't look for Bai Changchun, he couldn't never come to the underworld again. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He suddenly remembered the woman with half her face covered by a black veil. He remembered that the underworld saintess had given Yu Ji a token, saying that it could help her when she was in trouble. He wondered if it was true or not. Old song. Have you heard of the underworld saintess? Yu Qianqiu asked as he rubbed his chin. Tsangyan Aksayan and Shin Yu looked at him almost at the same time, their expressions a little stunned. Tsangyan Aksayan asked suspiciously, the underworld saintess. I've heard of her, but no one has seen her before. It's said that this woman has always lived in seclusion and is even more mysterious than the emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi. She has a very high status in the underworld royal palace. Why are you asking about her? Don't tell me you know the underworld saintess. Shen Yu also looked suspicious. I really do know her. Yu Qianzhou shrugged at the two noncommittally. It was fine as long as he confirmed that the underworld saintess was as powerful as she said. He changed the topic. After a while, he suddenly asked Sungyin Axian mysteriously, "Do you have a secluded place that I can borrow? The kind where I won't be disturbed." "What for?" Sungyin Axian was puzzled. "Why are you asking so many questions?" "I have my own uses for it," Yu Qianzhou said mysteriously. Grey Cloud Axian looked slightly unhappy and said in a deep voice, "Follow me." After saying that, he walked out. Yu Qianzhou waved at Jiu Yu, indicating for him to follow. Sungyin Axian led the two of them to the secret underground chamber. He wanted to see what Yu Qianzhou was up to. However, Yu Qianzhou said to him in a righteous tone, "Personal privacy. No peeking." Sungyin Axian immediately flung his sleeves and walked out angrily. Shen Yu was very self-aware. He wanted to respect Yu Qianzhou's privacy, but Yu Qianzhou pointed at him and shouted, "Help me guard the door. Don't let anyone peek in." Shen Yu nodded and stood guard outside the door. Yu Qianzhou sealed the stone door of the underground chamber. After checking around the room, he suddenly disappeared inside. In the ghost realm of the human realm, under the gloomy clouds and the chilly wind, Yu Qianzhou suddenly appeared outside the Ghost King's hall. He strode towards the Ghost King's hall. The ghost cultivators guarding outside immediately knelt down in fear and trepidation to greet him. Before walking up the steps of the Ghost King's hall, Yu Ji and the rest were startled by the three words, "Torture Envoy." With Yu Ji leading the way, they all rushed outside to greet him. "Rise!" Yu Qianzhou raised his hand calmly at the crowd. He then pointed at Yu Ji and smiled. "Come with me." The group of people slowly stood up with a respectful expression. "Yes." Yu Ji followed behind Yu Qianzhou. The two of them walked up the steps in front of the Ghost King's hall and disappeared into the depths of the palace. After walking to the center of the hall, Yu Qianzhou stopped and looked around the Ghost King's hall. He found that it was still the same as before. There was no change at all. Yu Ji stood behind him and cupped her fists. "Yu Ji awaits your orders." Yu Qianzhou turned around and looked at the beautiful lady in front of him. He could still vaguely remember the scene when they first met. He smiled. "I'm here to borrow something from you. Do you still have the token that the underworld saintess gave you?" Yu Ji was slightly startled, then she quickly took out the black token that was less than the size of a palm from the storage bag at her waist and handed it over with both hands. Yu Qianzhou took it and looked at it again. On one side was a cloud pattern, and on the other side was a mountain. There were 6 peaks on the mountain. The 5 peaks surrounded the highest peak in the center. There was a majestic palace in the middle. The material of the token seemed to be a very rare kind of wood. It was completely black. It was the token that he had seen in the past. In the past, Yu Qianzhou wouldn't have known what the palace on the command token meant. However, his current experience couldn't be compared to the past. After pondering for a moment, he faintly guessed that the palace guarded by the 5 peaks was probably the illustrious Nether Imperial Palace. "I'll borrow it for a while. I'll return it to you when the time comes." Yu Qianzhou put it away with a smile. His eyes inadvertently glanced at the storage bag at her waist. He took out 2 storage bracelets and handed them to her. "I won't lend it to you for free. These 2 bracelets can be used as rent. There are 10 storage spaces in each bracelet. They are more convenient and useful than storage bags." Yu Ji was startled again. She immediately bowed in fear. Yu Ji doesn't dare. To her, the token was of no use at all. If it was not for the fact that Yu Qianzhou had mentioned it, she would have forgotten about it. Even if Yu Qianqiu asked for it, she would not feel anything. How would she dare to accept the rent from the torture envoy? Just take it. It's not something valuable. I have many of them. Yu Qianqiu grabbed her hand and forcefully shoved it into her hand. However, he was pondering in his heart. If that netherworld saintess wanted to find out why the token ended up in his hands, he would at least have a reason to deal with it. Yu Ji's body could not help but tremble. After so many years, he was the second man who had grabbed her hand. She held the pair of bracelets and bowed. Thank you, torture envoy. Yu Qianqiu did not want to be polite with her. He smiled and said, there's something you need to prepare in advance. You need to secretly look for a candidate to take over your position as the Ghost King. Don't announce it for now. Maybe I'll take you out of the demon realm soon. Ah. Yu Ji suddenly raised her head. Her eyes were full of surprise and anxiety. Most of all, she was confused about the unknown future. Don't think too much. I'm asking you to do something for me. Of course, this is just my temporary idea. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved his hand. All right. I still have something to do. Go ahead. Before Yu Ji could respectfully send him off, Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared from the hole. She could not help but stare at the pair of storage bracelets in her hand in a daze. Why did he give her bracelets? Did the torture envoy fall in love with her? Thinking about it, she felt relieved. Just now, she did not see any lust in the torture envoy's eyes. Moreover, with the power of the torture envoy, he could get any kind of woman he wanted with just a word. Obviously, she had thought too much. She then began to examine the 2 storage bracelets, and discovered that there really were 10 storage spaces within each bracelet. She was pleasantly surprised as she wore the bracelets on her wrists, and after comparing them, she discovered that they were indeed much more useful than storage pouches. The stone door of the secret chamber guarded by Jiu Yu was pushed open with a rumble, and Yu Qianqiu walked out with a smile. Jiu Yu turned around and looked at him in confusion. He had only gone in for such a short time, and he had already come out. He did not know what secret he was doing. The 2 of them walked up the stairs leading to the underground secret chamber and found that Sungin Aksayan was guarding outside with his hands behind his back. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, Why are you looking at me like that? I've been thinking about a problem. You've been neglecting your work. The date of the immortal emperor's wedding is not far away. Let's see how you're going to explain it then. Sungin Aksayan sneered. Yu Qianqiu climbed up the last stone step. He held his stomach with both hands and chuckled. You don't understand. Walking around and seeing more can increase the inspiration for composing. The reason why I wanted to find a place where no one would disturb me was that I suddenly had good inspiration and needed to sort it out. After that, he slowly walked away. Sungin Aksayan looked at his back skeptically. The 3 of them stayed in the same room for a whole day. Yu Qianqiu, who was sleeping soundly with his head covered, suddenly sat up. The other 2 people sitting cross-legged looked at him in confusion. Yu Qianqiu jumped off the stone bed, looked out the window, and said in a deep voice, What the hell is that Lu Lin doing? He hasn't reported back after waiting for a whole day. I still have things to do and don't have time to play with him. They had now figured out the name of General Liu. Then what do you want? Do you really have the guts to go against the army of Onyx? They don't care if you have the immortal emperor's Dharma body or not, Sungin Aksayan said disdainfully. If a tiger doesn't show its might, you think I'm a sick cat. Let's go. Let's go find him. Yu Qianqiu strode outside. He was full of confidence now and was just waiting for a chance to go crazy. He had waited patiently for a day and would not wait another day. Sungin Aksayan wanted to stop him and tell him not to be impulsive, but Yu Qianzhou had already flown into the sky. He hurriedly chased after him with Xinyu. "Stop!" A loud shout sounded. 100 figures surrounded the three of them from all directions. The leader held a saber at his waist and said coldly, "Where do you want to go?" "Tell that Lu guy to come see me," Yu Qianzhou said with a gloomy expression. The leader said indifferently, "The general is not free right now." Quite arrogant. "Then I'll go see him." Yu Qianzhou's body moved, and the leading general pulled out his saber with a clang. The surrounding 100 soldiers immediately pulled out their sabers in a threatening manner. This immediately attracted many people to fly into the sky to watch. "Get lost!" Yu Qianzhou shouted and slapped with one palm. Countless purple flame high-energy sabers immediately spun around him like a tornado, wrapping him up and rushing forward. He did not suppress the terrifying aura that could make the meditation cultivators' hearts palpitate. The people who blocked him did not know the depth of his aura and immediately dodged in shock. Zhangyan Axayan was shocked. What was wrong with this kid? He dared to attack the Onyx army without a word. Zhou Yu and Zhangyan Axayan quickly followed. The meditation cultivator general who dodged did not dare to forcibly stop Zhangyan Axayan without receiving a death order, so he let the two pass. However, he then took out a black horn, raised it in front of his mouth, and blew it. The dull sound of the horn immediately resounded throughout Twilight City. Countless people were startled by the battle horn of the Onyx army and flew into the sky to see what was going on. More than 1,000 soldiers of the Onyx army quickly flew into the sky with a murderous aura. General Lu Lin, who was leading them, strode out of the city guard's mansion. Yu Qianzhou and the other two stood at the gate of the city guard's mansion. Zhangyan Axayan and Zhou Yu looked at Yu Qianzhou in front of them with some bewilderment. They did not know what this guy wanted to do. The surrounding crowd looked at the three of them in shock. They were a little worried that Zhangyan Axayan would make a move again and cause trouble for everyone. General Lu Lin looked at the three of them with burning eyes and said in a deep voice, "What's going on?" The general who blew the horn quickly came over and reported, "General, Yu Qianzhou said he wants to see you. I told you that the general is not free, but he attacked the Onyx army." Lu Lin suddenly stared at Yu Qianzhou, and he sneered repeatedly. "How audacious of you to dare make a move against my Onyx army. Do you really think we're just there for show? Don't talk nonsense here." Yu Qianzhou stood with his hands behind his back and said expressionlessly, "I gave Madame He Qi face and waited patiently for a day. Didn't you say you were going to report to the higher-ups? I'm here to listen to your higher-ups' decision. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first." Lu Lin completely ignored Yu Qianzhou and only stared coldly at Zhangyan Axayan. "Consecrator Zhangyan, I only have one question for you. Are you going to stay and wait for instructions from our higher-ups, or are you going to accompany Yu Qianzhou and force your way out?" The threat in his words was very strong. Zhangyan Axayan's eyes flickered. It was easy to charge out, but he couldn't escape forever. The Onyx army was filled with experts. He was afraid that once he charged out, he would immediately be chased endlessly. "I'm giving you face, but you don't want it." Yu Qianzhou laughed coldly. He reached out with one hand from behind his back, and the hand inside his sleeve grabbed a black token. He slowly walked toward Lu Lin and said in a deep voice, "Open your dog eyes wide and take a good look." He guessed that the underworld saintess wouldn't fool people. He just didn't know how much trouble this token could solve. However, he believed that even if this token wasn't very useful, it could at least make the Onyx army wary and not dare to act recklessly. Lu Lin didn't care at all. He stared at Zhangyan Axayan and was about to interrogate him when the expressions of the soldiers beside him changed at the same time. Suddenly, all of them knelt down on one knee toward Yu Qianzhou. "What are you doing?" Lu Lin was startled and shouted to his left and right. "General, it's the Onyx Emperor's token." Someone beside him transmitted his voice in a trembling voice. When Yu Qianzhou saw the kneeling soldiers, he was immediately emboldened. He laughed coldly and said, "How audacious of you to disregard the token in my hand. I want to see how many heads you have." When Lu Lin's gaze shifted to the token in Yu Qianzhou's hand, he was immediately stunned by the pattern of 5 peaks surrounding and protecting the main peak. That was obviously the Onyx Emperor Mountain. Especially the material of the token. It was made from the dark wood found in the dark wood forest in the back palace of the Onyx Royal Palace. In the entire netherworld, only the place where the Onyx Emperor resided would have dark wood growing. There was no way to fake it. He immediately cried out involuntarily, "The Onyx Emperor's token." Trembling, he bent his knees and knelt on the ground with a thud. He said in a trembling voice, "Your subordinate Lu Lin didn't know that you were coming. I deserve to die 10,000 times for my crime." When he knelt down, coupled with the words, "Onyx Emperor's token," the 1,000 soldiers in the sky immediately changed their expressions. They all knelt down on one knee and bowed. When this inexplicable scene came out, everyone was shocked. The Onyx Emperor's token. The sky was filled with voices. Whether it was the people from the immortal world or the netherworld, no one dared to be arrogant in the sky. They all flashed down and stood with their hands behind their backs, showing their respect to the reclusive Onyx Emperor. Zhongyun, Xayan and Xin Yu looked at Yu Qianzhou with their mouths agape. They couldn't have imagined that Yu Qianzhou would suddenly do this. Yesterday, he was a prisoner of the Onyx army and was almost killed. Today, he made the insufferably arrogant Onyx army submit to him with a wave of his hand. The contrast was too great. The shock in Zhongyun Xayan's heart was indescribable. This was the legendary Onyx Emperor's token that was personally carved by the Onyx Emperor. It could command the entire netherworld. Although this token couldn't truly command the entire netherworld, how many people in the netherworld would dare to stop this token from going anywhere? It was no different from challenging the authority of the Onyx Emperor. The Onyx Emperor's anger could shake the entire 3 realms. He couldn't figure out why Yu Qianzhou had the Onyx Emperor's token. This thing couldn't be everywhere. He thought about it over and over again, but he still couldn't figure out how Yu Qianzhou got involved with the Onyx Emperor. In fact, not only them, even Yu Qianzhou was a little surprised. He guessed that this token would have some use, but he just wanted to solve the current problem. Just like Zhongyun Xayan said, the day of the immortal emperor's wedding was not far away. It took more than half a month to travel from the entrance of the netherworld to Twilight City. Then, he would have to travel through the endless horizon to find Bai Changchun in the forbidden area of the netherworld. Who knew how much time it would take? Including the time needed to go back and forth, there really wasn't enough time. He couldn't afford to waste time here, so he borrowed the token in Yu Ji's hand, ready to solve the problem quickly. But he never dreamed that it would be the Onyx Emperor's token in his hand, the token that could make the army of the dark underworld surrender at its feet. It was over. Wasn't that saintess of the netherworld trying to cheat him? How could this thing be given away so casually? The key point was that it was given to a weak ghost cultivator like Yu Ji. Anyone would think that it was definitely not something too valuable. If it wasn't so, how could he take it out and cause such a big commotion? Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly in his heart. At present, he had solved the problem quickly, but this token turned out to be the Onyx Emperor's token. Its power was a bit too much. Looking at the current situation, it was obvious that even an expert at the early stage of the Netherworld Emperor was trembling and kneeling at his feet. He was afraid that there would be more trouble in the future. First of all, once the news reached the ears of the Emperor of the Netherworld, Emperor Bai Qi would definitely find out how the Onyx Emperor's token came into his hands. Maybe he would send people to arrest him. Even if the Emperor of the Netherworld let him go, the immortal Emperor Jin Tai would probably want to find out why he had the Onyx Emperor's token. This was big trouble, and it was very likely that he would lose his foothold in both the immortal world and the netherworld. Chapter 1044. Yu Qianzhou slowly lowered his raised arm and put the token of the Underworld Emperor into his sleeve. He had 1,000 thoughts in his mind, but he looked calm on the surface as he walked toward the city guard mansion. When he passed by Lu Lin, he tilted his head and glanced at him, saying calmly, "Come with me." "Yes." Lu Lin quickly stood up and followed Yu Qianzhou into the city guard's mansion. Thousands of soldiers knelt motionlessly outside. No one dared to stand up on their own. Zhangyan, Axayan and Xin Yu were still in shock. Looking at Yu Qianzhou's back, they didn't dare to follow him in without permission. Yu Qianzhou's identity became the biggest question in their minds. In the main hall of the city guard's mansion, Yu Qianzhou casually set up a soundproof barrier. He turned to look at Lu Lin, who was standing with his hands behind his back in fear and trepidation. Without any preamble, he went straight to the point and asked, "Why did the Onyx army participate in Mu Bing's mission to kill me?" Lu Lin's face was pale as he said, "This subordinate doesn't know. This subordinate only received the commander's order to cooperate with Mu Bing's mission. I really don't know anything else." "Commander?" Yu Qianzhou raised an eyebrow and asked, "Wu Xiong?" "Ah." Lu Lin was stunned. He couldn't understand why the person with the Emperor of the Underworld's token would ask such an idiotic question. He paused and quickly explained, "It's not Wu Xiong from the immortal world. It's the commander of our Onyx army, Hong Ji." Hong Ji. Yu Qianzhou immediately realized that he had made a mistake, but he didn't mind it at all. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "Does a commander have a lot of power? What rank is it in your Onyx army?" Hearing this, Lu Lin immediately realized that he knew nothing about the Onyx army, so he explained in detail in a fawning manner, "This subordinate holds the position of 1,000 guards in the Onyx army. Every 100,000 guards are under the control of a commander, and every commander is under the control of a grand commander. There are 10 grand commanders in total, and they all listen to Madame Blackpool's orders." Yu Qianzhou silently calculated, and after coming to a conclusion, he was immediately shocked and said, "If that's the case, doesn't that mean that the army of Onyx has 100 million soldiers? Only more, no less." Lu Lin said respectfully, "Because the Netherworld's territory is too vast, 100 million soldiers are actually not enough. The combined forces of the various tyrants exceed 100 billion, and this doesn't even include those in the Netherworld River's water race. Our dark underworld army is still under great pressure. Fortunately, Madame is wise and has always been expanding the army." Damn it! Was this not enough? They already had 100 million soldiers, and they still wanted to expand. Yu Qianzhou was almost speechless. He only had 1 million cultivators in the human world, and most of them were below the soul formation stage. Every soldier in the Onyx army was at least a minor immortal. This Madame Blackpool's power was astonishing. But thinking about it, compared to the hundreds of billions of people under the Netherworld's tyrants, 100 million soldiers was indeed not a lot. Damn it! This Netherworld was really big to be able to accommodate so many people. No wonder even the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi could only intimidate and govern the Netherworld, but couldn't truly unify it. It was indeed very difficult to unify so many people. From this, Yu Qianzhou more or less understood some things. No wonder all the sects in the immortal world fought to make a fortune in the Netherworld. This was a huge market of more than 100 billion underworld cultivators. Even if each person bought an immortal world weapon or magic treasure, it would still be a huge number. The spirit stones developed in the Netherworld were enough to feed all the cultivators in the immortal world. It was said that the Netherworld royal palace prohibited the Netherworld from doing business with the immortal world, but with such a huge demand here, it was impossible for the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi to forcibly suppress it. Therefore, he could only turn a blind eye to it. Otherwise, with the Emperor of the Underworld's eyes and ears, there was no way he wouldn't know about such a big black market in Twilight City, and he wouldn't allow the Onyx army to sit here and divide the spoils. One had to know that the Onyx army had hundreds of millions of soldiers and horses fighting everywhere, and the consumption of weapons and magic treasures was also huge. Yu Qianzhou came back to his senses and asked, "What's the background of that Dong Shunlai? Is he also a member of the Onyx army?" This subordinate has never seen this person before, but it shouldn't be difficult to find out his background. "I believe that you can use the Emperor of the Underworld's token to investigate the entire Onyx army," Lu Lin replied respectfully. Yu Qianzhou was speechless again. He was a fox borrowing the tiger's might, so how would he dare to use the Emperor of the Underworld's token to mobilize the entire Onyx army? Wouldn't that be courting death? Moreover, this matter involved the Onyx army. After thinking for a while, he knew that he couldn't stay here any longer, so he asked indifferently, "Can I leave now?" "Yes, sir." Lu Lin retreated to the side in fear. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly, removed the soundproof barrier, and strode outside. Seeing nearly 1,000 soldiers still kneeling outside the mansion, he felt that it was even more unwise to stay here any longer. He quickly walked to Zhangyan Xayan and Shen Yu's side, took out his flying shuttle, and said, "Everything is fine here, let's continue our journey." After saying that, he took the lead and jumped up first. Zhangyan Xayan and Shen Yu looked at each other, not knowing why he was in such a hurry, but they also flashed up. Yu Qianzhou didn't even look back as he flew away on his flying shuttle, leaving a group of people in Twilight City speechless. After a long time, Lu Lin confirmed that Yu Qianzhou had really left, and then he ordered his men to stand up. He felt like he was dreaming. Yu Qianzhou didn't hold him responsible for anything. On the flying shuttle far away from Twilight City, Yu Qianzhou suddenly shouted, "Old Zhang, you drive, let's hurry up." This time, Zhangyan Xayan didn't insist. He took over Yu Qianzhou's hand, and after flying for a while, he suddenly asked, "Yu Qianzhou, you have the Emperor of the Underworld's token, why didn't you take it out earlier?" Seeing that no one answered, he looked back and found that Yu Qianzhou was frowning and thinking about something, so he asked again, "Why are you in such a hurry to leave? You have the Emperor of the Underworld's token, did you ask about the assassination?" "Ask what?" Yu Qianzhou came back to his senses and smiled bitterly, "My Emperor of the Underworld's token is fake. If I continue to stay, I'm afraid I won't be able to leave. Old Zhang, you should go as fast as you can. I'm afraid there will be pursuers if you are too late." His words were half true and half false. In short, he hoped that Zhangyan Xayan could hurry up and reach the mysterious forbidden area of the underworld as soon as possible. Anyway, it was not good to stay in the underworld for a long time. Ah! Zhangyan Xayan and Shen Yu were speechless at the same time. They looked back at him in disbelief. They didn't expect him to dare to fake the Emperor of the Underworld's token. Now they understood why he was in such a hurry to leave. Fake the Emperor of the Underworld's token. Can't they tell the real from the fake? Yu Qianzhou, you are not joking, are you? Zhangyan Xayan was still in disbelief. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly and said, "I didn't know it was the Emperor of the Underworld's token. I just saw it once by accident. I heard that this token is very useful in the underworld, so I made a replica. I just wanted to use it to solve the problem at hand. I didn't expect it to be the Emperor of the Underworld's token. If I knew it was the Emperor of the Underworld's token, I wouldn't have taken it out. But don't worry, they won't find out for a while." "Humph. I think you are really tired of living. You even dare to fake the Emperor of the Underworld's token. Is there anything in this world that you don't dare to do? Even if you want to die, you don't have to drag the two of us into this." Zhangyan Xayan's face darkened on the spot. He had thought it strange earlier. How could Yu Qianzhou have the Emperor of the Underworld's token? It was unbelievable. It turned out that it was a fake. Damn it. I said I didn't do it on purpose. Didn't I do it with good intentions? Yu Qianzhou said angrily, I really don't want to drag the two of you into this. If you are not happy, we will go our separate ways now. Hearing this, Tsangyan Aksayan and Shin Yu's mouths twitched at the same time. The two of them wanted to go their separate ways, but could they? Their lives were tied to him. If he was finished, everyone would be finished with him. They had to think of a way to protect him. Tsangyan Aksayan was so angry that he didn't say anything. His face darkened, but his flying speed gradually increased to the limit that he could control. After a moment of silence, Shin Yu said weakly, I think we should go by water. Once the fake emperor of the underworld's token is exposed, the army of the underworld on land will immediately cast a net to capture us. We won't be able to escape. If we go by water, at least the army of the underworld won't dare to easily track us into the underworld river. It should be much safer than on land. That makes sense. Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly. Tsangyan Aksayan, who was silent with a darkened face, immediately steered the flying shuttle to change direction and quickly flew toward the underworld river. Fortunately, they weren't too far from the underworld river. Tsangyan Aksayan flew quickly and reached the shore of the underworld river in half an hour. Yu Qianqiu put away the flying shuttle. Tsangyan Aksayan quickly checked the surroundings and nodded to Shin Yu after confirming that there was no one around. Shin Yu didn't say anything and quickly transformed into his original form. He opened the clam and the other two quickly went in. The clam quickly closed and sank into the water. Shin Yu swam quickly in the underworld river. His stomach was white and beautiful. Tsangyan Aksayan and Yu Qianqiu felt a sense of security and couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Then, the two of them were stunned and stared at each other. In the end, it was Yu Qianqiu who tilted his head and lay down with his legs crossed. Why do you have to go to that mysterious forbidden area? I'm starting to wonder if you want to do something there. Tsangyan Aksayan sat cross-legged and asked in a deep voice. You don't know about this. You don't know how vast the underworld is unless you go there. How can you know what's so mysterious about it if you don't go there? Yu Qianqiu rested his head on his arm and looked at him. He sighed and said, Don't you think it's a pity that you can't go there in your lifetime? Nonsense. Tsangyan Aksayan snorted coldly. You should think about how we're going to return to the immortal realm. I only hate that the disciples of my heartless palace in Twilight City will be dragged down by you. Although he said that, he was worried about whether He Jinquang would be able to successfully deliver the Jade Archive to the sect master. Sigh. Yu Qianqiu let out a long sigh and closed his eyes. Right now, he was a little worried about the people from the World Chamber of Commerce. He wanted to make a trip back to the World Chamber of Commerce. However, he remembered that he had instructed Hibiscus and Wu Lixue to contact him immediately if anything went wrong. He felt a little relieved. Just like that, the two of them were sealed inside the clam, silently moving through the Netherworld River. Fortunately, several days passed without any incident. In the forest of the majestic imperial harem of the Netherworld Royal Palace, the sound of something rolling could be heard from the pavilion that stood quietly. A few large fireflies were crawling on the windowsill. Inside the window, a black wooden rocking chair had been placed next to the window. The white-robed scholar was lying on it, rocking slowly. He appeared to be at ease, his eyes slightly closed as he faced the window. If the night sky outside was filled with beautiful stars and a bright moon, he would probably open his eyes and slowly enjoy the view. However, the sky outside was forever black. There was really nothing to enjoy. With a flash of silver light, the 1,000 soldiers in silver armor appeared, floating outside the window and looking at him. The rocking chair was still rocking slowly. The scholar asked through the window sill without opening his eyes, You're here. How's the investigation going? I've investigated. That Yu Qianqiu is indeed holding the Emperor of the Netherworld's order carved from the Netherworld wood. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor frowned and said, It's strange. How did the Emperor of the Netherworld's order fall into his hands? Could it be that you carved more than two sides of the Emperor of the Netherworld's order? Or someone secretly cut down the Netherworld wood in the Netherworld forest and made an imitation? But that's not right. The Netherworld wood is hard and difficult to cut. It has branches but no leaves, so it's easy to count. I've already checked once, and there's no damage at all. The scholar rolled his eyes and said indifferently, let's put this matter aside for now. Why did the army of the Netherworld of Twilight City get involved in the assassination of Yu Qianqiu? Have you found out? I can't find out for now. Several important clues have been cut off. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor flashed into the attic, walked to the back of the rocking chair and gently shook it. He explained, Mu Bing is dead. No one saw with their own eyes who killed him. And those who participated in the assassination were all killed by Ashiro Yunshin in a fit of rage. The captain of the 1,000 guards, Lu Lin, died the day after Yu Qianqiu left. The commander of Lu Lin, Hong Ji, also died. The reason was that they committed suicide to escape punishment after offending the Emperor of the Netherworld's order. Committing suicide to escape punishment? The scholar's eyes slowly opened, gleaming with a bright light. Then, he slowly closed his eyes again. At the same time, the 1,000 soldiers in silver armor suddenly felt that the rocking chair was as heavy as 10,000 kilograms. It suddenly stopped rocking, and he couldn't move the rocking chair anymore. He was slightly shocked, knowing that the seemingly indifferent scholar was angry. Do you believe that it was suicide to escape punishment? The scholar asked indifferently. The rocking chair could be rocked again, and the goo-goo sound of rolling back and forth sounded in the attic again. Of course not. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor rocked the rocking chair, and the corner of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. I quickly ordered the network to comb through the whereabouts of these people, and finally found some clues. The one who assassinated Yu Qianqiu was an early-stage emperor of the Netherworld, and he was a subordinate of the king of Black Mountain. You mean that the Black Mountain and the army of Dark Hell are in cahoots? The scholar asked indifferently. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor shook his head slightly. That's nothing. I'm worried that the Black Mountain, the army of Dark Hell, and the Immortal Palace in the Immortal World are in cahoots. Are they plotting something? The scholar said sarcastically. Even if I give the Underworld Palace to them, can they keep it under control? The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor chuckled and said, the matter is not confirmed yet. I have already sent people around the Black Mountain to investigate in secret. If this matter really has something to do with the Black Mountain, I believe it won't be long before we find out if the three parties are in cahoots. The scholar let out a nasal sound. His handsome face had a serene expression, as if he had fallen asleep. After a while, he suddenly raised his hand and said, someone is feeling guilty. Maybe your investigation has been discovered. You should leave. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor looked outside the window and turned into a beam of light and flew out. Not long after he left, a black light landed on the stone path outside the attic. The cold and noble Lady Blackpool appeared. Hearing the rumbling sounds coming from the attic, she immediately knelt to the window and said, Blackpool requests an audience with the Emperor of the Underworld. A cold and emotionless voice came from the window. Did you forget that I said you are not allowed to come here without my summons? Go to the Red Armor Army and receive your punishment. Madame Blackpool trembled in fear. She kowtowed to him with a pale face and said, Please forgive me, Underworld Emperor. I have a grudge against the Red Armored Army. He will throw me to the boundless horizon. I begged the Emperor of the Underworld to listen to Blackpool's explanation. I barged in because I was flustered. Please forgive me, Emperor of the Underworld. Having said that, she kowtowed repeatedly on the stone path. You have hundreds of millions of soldiers under your command. You are second only to one and above tens of thousands. What can make you flustered? The voice drifted out from the window. I'd like to hear it. If your explanation can't satisfy me, you should go to the endless sea. Come up. Thank you for your mercy, Emperor of the Underworld. Lady Blackpool crawled up hastily. The mark on her forehead was still there. She could have dissolved the mark easily with her cultivation, but she purposely left it on her forehead. She walked quickly toward the attic, dragging the long black veil behind her as if she were a pitiful person. As she entered the attic, she saw the scholar swaying slowly on the rocking chair by the window. She walked quickly to the scholar and knelt down by his feet, saying with a sobbing tone, "I'm guilty. I failed to live up to your expectations." The scholar didn't bat an eyelid. He said nonchalantly, "Now that you have admitted your guilt, it means I didn't wrong you. Go to the endless sea." Lady Blackpool choked. She knew better than anyone else what it was like to be with a tiger, to be with the Emperor. Fortunately, she thought she had figured out the nature of the scholar. She plucked up her courage and moved to the opposite side of the scholar, sitting against the wall. She hugged one of the scholar's bare feet under the white robe and started massaging it. She squeezed out her tears sadly and said, "Let me serve the Emperor of the Underworld for the last time." She buried her head in the scholar's bare foot and massaged it with just the right amount of strength. Suddenly, she found the scholar's other bare foot lifted up automatically, and the sole of his foot pressed on her plump breasts, moving up slowly. Lady Blackpool suddenly raised her head and saw the scholar open his eyes and look at her with a smile. At the same time, she found the restless sole of his foot had slid into her clothes along the neckline. Chapter 1045. Emperor of Netherworld. Madame Blackpool moaned and moved aside shyly. However, her clothes were hooked by the scholar's bare feet. The clothes were made of good material, silky and smooth. They were peeled off from her body instantly. She moved away, but her clothes didn't. She didn't have any underwear inside. Her snow-white and smooth upper body was exposed to the air. Madame Blackpool timidly covered her full breasts with her arms. She bit her red lips shyly. Her body was so alluring. "You haven't served me for a long time." The scholar took his bare feet off the black dress and smiled at the snow-white and delicate body sitting in a pile of black palace dresses. "I'm willing to serve you, Emperor of Netherworld. But I'm afraid that I won't have another chance." Madame Blackpool held her full breasts and lowered her head slightly. She looked like she was about to cry. "Not necessarily," the scholar said lightly. He didn't say anything else. He just looked at her with a smile as if he was saying, "Let's see your performance first." The atmosphere in the attic suddenly became very romantic. A few fireflies flew over and clung on the windowsill, making her beautiful body even more alluring. Madame Blackpool was like a bride on her first night. She released her arms shyly. Her unparalleled breasts amazed the scholar, who had seen them more than once. He watched her white and tender body slowly stand up from a pile of black palace dresses. She was naked and so perfect that it made people's hearts beat faster. Madame Blackpool spread her arms and pulled out the hairpin that tied her hair. Her black hair fell on her shoulders like a waterfall, reaching her waist and touching her butt. The hairpin fell on the ground. The cool night wind blew in through the window. Her waterfall-like hair fluttered in the wind, making the beautiful woman look even more alluring. Madame Blackpool's charm and beauty were undeniable. Otherwise, the proud scholar wouldn't have fallen in love with her and become his favorite concubine. She knew how to seduce men. She was experienced in doing so. However, this kind of woman usually didn't want to be ordinary. The scholar felt a bit sorry for her. However, it was hard to change one's nature. He would never spend time and energy on persuading or forcing her to change. He had to make use of things that couldn't be changed. The scholar lay on the rocking chair motionlessly and looked at her with a smile. Madame Blackpool took one step forward and bowed. "I will make up for my mistake and serve you with all my heart, Emperor of Netherworld." She gently grabbed onto one of the scholar's hands and pulled him up from the rocking chair. Then, she wrapped her body around him and rubbed against him. Her slender fingers were like agile snakes as she unknowingly took off the white robe on the scholar's body. Then, she went to the front of the scholar and pushed him down onto the rocking chair. The rocking chair couldn't help but shake. The woman couldn't wait and climbed on it impatiently. The woman climbed up and climbed on the scholar eagerly. With her red tongue, licked, and teased the scholar. In the end, the woman buried her head in the scholar's lower body. When the erotic and decaying sounds were heard in the attic, the silver-armored soldier stood straight on the roof of the attic with his arms crossed. He was used to the sounds in the attic, but he still couldn't help but frown. The gentle sea, the passionate sea, the violent sea, and some people called it the sea of desire. After everything calmed down, a naked man and a woman were lying on the rocking chair in the attic. The rocking chair was a bit narrow. The woman had to curl up on the man's body. She rested her head on the man's shoulder, and her hair fell on the man's chest like a waterfall. The scholar held her with one hand and moved his other hand up and down Madame Blackpool's body. Finally, he played with her breasts and said with a faint smile, "You are getting better and better at serving people. It seems that you didn't raise those male pets in the palace for nothing." Madame Blackpool's blushing face suddenly turned pale. The scholar could feel her body stiffen. She whispered in his ear, "Ever since I followed the Emperor of Netherworld, I have been the woman of the Emperor of Netherworld. I will never let any man take my body. Those men are just servants who give me massages. Could it be that even you are jealous?" She chuckled. The scholar laughed out loud, pinched her plump breasts, and asked, "Say it. Don't you want to explain something to me?" Madame Blackpool put her head on his shoulder and said with grievance, "It's all my fault. I was too eager to expand the strength of the army of dark underworld. I let some people mixed into the army of dark underworld. They were bribed by the people of the immortal realm to help them kill Yu Qianqiu. I didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu was the messenger sent by you, the Emperor of Netherworld. They knew they were in big trouble. When I sent people to catch them, they committed suicide because they were afraid of you, the Emperor of Netherworld. That's too easy for them. However, it was because I didn't teach them well that the identity of the messenger sent by the Emperor of Netherworld was exposed. That's why I came here to beg for forgiveness. I forgot about the order given by the Emperor of Netherworld. Someone had secretly told her about murdering Yu Qianqiu, but she had just casually ordered her subordinates to do it and didn't take it seriously. She had almost forgotten about it in the blink of an eye. After all, Yu Qianqiu was just a nobody to her. He was just an actor who was appointed by Jean Tai to sing and compose music. He was no different from one of her male pets. She didn't care about him at all. So what if he was killed? However, she was shocked when she heard that the token of the Emperor of Netherworld was in Yu Qianqiu's hands. She wasn't afraid of the messenger who was involved in the assassination of the Emperor of Netherworld. Yu Qianqiu didn't reveal his identity. It could be explained to the Emperor of Netherworld as a misunderstanding. What she was afraid of was that the series of secrets behind this would be exposed because of such a small matter. Once the Emperor of Netherworld found out, she would be doomed eternally. She would rather die than live. Therefore, this murder, which she didn't care about, immediately attracted her attention. Soon, all the people who were involved in this matter were killed, and the clues were cut off. As soon as she let out a sigh of relief, she found that the silver-armored 1,000 soldiers had sent someone to investigate this matter in secret. The silver-armored 1,000 soldiers were the close subordinates of the Emperor of Netherworld. Their every move represented the Emperor of Netherworld. It was obvious that the Emperor of Netherworld had his eyes on this matter. She was almost scared out of her wits. That was why she broke into this place despite the fact that the Emperor of Netherworld forbade her from intruding into this place. She had to report and explain to the Emperor first to show her loyalty. Even though all the clues had been cut off, there was still a difference between telling the truth and being found out. She had to resolve the possible crisis in time. The scholar played with her breasts and snorted coldly, "I haven't shown my token for a long time. You want to commit suicide to escape punishment? Humph. It's good that you know you're scared. Forget it, let bygones be bygones. Your subordinates need to be disciplined in the future. I will do my best to discipline them." The Madam of Blackpool showed a delighted expression. She hugged the scholar's neck and asked feebly, "You don't blame me anymore?" The scholar's hand slid to her pert buttocks and sighed, "You are a stunner. Without you, it would be less fun. Thank you for your forgiveness, Emperor of Netherworld. I will try my best to serve the Emperor of Netherworld." The Madam of Blackpool was delighted. She twisted her body like a water snake. She couldn't help but murmur in a strange tone, "Yu Qianqiu is so lucky. He has been favored by you and given the token of the Emperor of Netherworld. I have never enjoyed such an honor." She had been doubting the authenticity of the token of the Emperor of Netherworld in Yu Qianqiu's hands. It was because she had never heard that the Emperor of Netherworld had contacted Yu Qianqiu. How could Yu Qianqiu have the token of the Emperor of Netherworld? She came here to verify the authenticity of the token from the Emperor of Netherworld. You don't have to worry about it. I have my own plan, the scholar said with a faint smile. Though he didn't admit it, it was tantamount to admitting that he had given the token of the Emperor of Netherworld to Yu Qianqiu in her eyes. Yes. I have only one thing to worry about, which is to serve the Emperor of Netherworld well. The Madam of Blackpool let out an extremely charming smile and slid to the bottom of the rocking chair. Her waterfall-like hair covered the lower part of the scholar's body, trying her best to flatter him. After another round of passionate indulgence, the Madam of Blackpool helped the scholar put on his clothes carefully. Then she picked up the clothes on the ground and put them on. She tied up her hair and looked elegant and noble again. However, a hint of laziness still lingered on her face. The scholar stood by the window and looked at the outside quietly. The Madam of Blackpool, who had dressed herself from head to toe, came to his back and hugged his waist tightly. "When I miss you, can I come here and serve you whenever I want to?" she asked resentfully. She wanted to strike while the iron was hot and break the prohibition. Otherwise, no matter how good she was at serving men, she couldn't use the same method all the time. The man would get tired of her sooner or later. "You are in charge of hundreds of millions of soldiers and horses, so you must have many things to report. It's unreasonable to forbid you from coming here." The scholar nodded and patted his hands that were hugging his belly, saying with a smile, "All right, you can go and do your own things. I want some peace and quiet." "Yes." Madam of Blackpool let go of her hands and bowed to him happily. Then, she walked down the attic while dragging her long skirt behind her. After she walked out of the attic and turned into a black light, the silver-armored soldier drifted down from the sky and landed by the window. He looked at the scholar with a frown and said, "According to what you said, did you really give the token to Yu Qianqiu?" "It's impossible." The scholar squinted at him and said angrily, "Why do you always eavesdrop on me when I do this kind of thing? Do you know it affects my mood?" The silver-armored soldier was startled. His face twitched as he watched the scholar turn around and walk down the attic. Then, he saw the scholar walk out of the attic. The scholar walked on the stone path around the attic. He was wearing a white robe and walked slowly with his bare feet. He wasn't afraid of the cold and walked to the back of the attic. There was a small path at the back that led to the depths of the forest. He walked slowly along the path. Chapter 1046. The serene wood forest was dotted with specks of starlight. It was the fireflies that climbed up the trees. The moment the scholar stepped onto the forest path, 2 fireflies flew out from the trees, dancing and crisscrossing in front of him, illuminating the path ahead. The scholar trailed behind the two balls of light, walking at a leisurely pace, complementing his scholarly attire. The serene wood forest wasn't that big. After the two fireflies slowly led the way for several hundred meters, they finally reached the end of the path. The path ahead suddenly opened up, and an exquisite little white courtyard appeared. The two fireflies quickly flew over, landing on the roof. There were already many fireflies resting there. The little courtyard was surrounded by white jade walls, and the house was made of white jade. The walls weren't even as tall as a person, and an adult could see everything inside at a glance. There was a door on the walls, but there was no door panel to block it. The scholar stepped onto the threshold with his bare feet, looking at the courtyard that was covered with fine and smooth black sand. Although it was black in color, it was extremely clean and tidy, causing one to not have the heart to destroy it. His outstretched foot shrank back, and hearing the wang wang sound coming from inside, he immediately smiled bitterly. "Can I come in?" "Don't come in if there's nothing important." A clear and faint voice mixed with the humming sound. "Then I'd better come in." The scholar shook his head helplessly, his outstretched foot paused for a moment. Finally, he steeled his heart and stepped on the fine and soft black sand, taking one step at a time as he walked in. On the left side of the courtyard, under the porch, a black-robed woman with shoulder-length hair and half of her face covered by a black veil was turning a stone mill. The wang-wang sound came from the stone mill. There were several fireflies climbing up the porch's pillar, illuminating the masked woman's actions. Under the groove of the stone mill, there was a silver urn. Fine and even black sand was sliding down from the groove, rustling as it flowed into the silver urn. On top of the stone mill, there was a fist-sized feeding hole. The masked woman pushed the stone mill with one hand, while the other hand held a few black divine-grade spirit stones. From time to time, she would put a piece into the feeding hole. Usually, most people grind beans, and what they grinded was tofu, but what she grinded was spirit stones. She didn't know what to call the fine black sand she grinded. But one thing was for sure, since it was able to grind a divine-grade spirit stone into fine sand, it was most likely not an ordinary grindstone. The scholar left a trail of footprints on the fine sand. He walked to the porch and turned his head to look at the masterpiece he had created. He stared at it for a while, as if he was trying to figure out something. In the end, he shrugged his shoulders to no avail. Thus, he stared at the masked woman for a while longer, then clenched his fist and coughed lightly. "Why do you have to go through so much trouble? I can make as many of these things as you want. Are you trying to start a conversation?" The masked woman didn't even look at him. She frowned and said, "There's an obscene aura on your body. If you do that kind of thing again, you're not allowed to enter my door for 3 days. You can even smell it." The scholar raised his hand to his chest and sniffed, but didn't smell anything unusual. He smiled wryly. "I purposely walked over slowly to get rid of the smell on my body, but I didn't expect." He suddenly paused, looking back in the direction of his little house. In fact, it wasn't far from this courtyard, only a few hundred meters away. Although the masked woman's cultivation wasn't high, it shouldn't be hard for her to hear that kind of unscrupulous and unrestrained moans. He turned around and coughed lightly. "Don't tell me you heard it already." That woman screamed so loudly, it's hard not to hear it. But this has nothing to do with whether I heard it or not. There is indeed that kind of obscene aura on your body. If I smell it too much, it will affect my divination ability. If it's serious, my divination ability might even disappear. Be careful in the future. The masked woman said with indifference. That kind of erotic matter was tasteless to her, like chewing wax. "So it's like that." The scholar's expression turned solemn, nodding his head. "I'll remember it." The masked woman added another piece of divine-grade spirit stone into the stone mill's feeding port, pushing it at a steady speed, speaking in an indifferent tone. "Don't beat around the bush. If you have something to say, just say it. What do you want from me?" The scholar stood in the corridor with his hands clasped behind his back. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, I personally carved 2 Netherworld Emperor's tokens, other than the one I have on me. I gave the other one to you. The masked woman suddenly stopped pushing the stone mill, and the humming sound disappeared. The scholar who was paying attention to the masked woman's expression thought he hit the nail on the head, but then he saw the masked woman bend down and pick up the silver urn on the ground. It turned out the urn was filled with fine black sand. The masked woman picked up the urn, glanced at the scholar, and asked, Why didn't you say it? The scholar choked on his words. He watched as the masked woman walked down the corridor, slowly walking to the corner of the courtyard with the urn in her arms. She reached into the urn and picked up a handful of fine black sand, sprinkling it over the courtyard. The scholar rubbed his forehead, feeling a little helpless. Did you give away the token I gave you? Yes. The masked woman slowly stepped back as she sprinkled the fine black sand. Can't I give it away? No, I never interfere with anything you do. The scholar's eyes flickered, staring at the masked woman's back. But I also know you don't easily interact with strangers. I just want to know, why did you give it to Yu Qianqiu? Yu Qianqiu. The masked woman was startled, her hands stopped moving. She recalled the native with a head full of pigtails she met in the underground palace in the human world, a very strange native. She had divined for him once and discovered that the native was actually someone who had died twice but was still alive. She wanted to clearly divine how he had died, but in the end, she couldn't see through him. She wanted to divine his future, but she still couldn't see through him. Even his cultivation couldn't be seen through. She could only guess his name, that he was a person full of mysteries. As far as she could remember, she had only met 3 people whose fates she couldn't divine. However, these 3 people all appeared in the human world where she was trapped, and they all happened to be very close to each other. One of them was Bai Changchun, who had killed the 2 generals of the underworld who were protecting her. The other one was the native with a head full of pigtails. His name was Yu Qianqiu. She had a deep impression of him, so she remembered him as soon as this name was mentioned. However, she didn't give the token of the underworld emperor to Yu Qianqiu, who had a head full of pigtails, and she couldn't give the token of the underworld emperor to a person she couldn't figure out. When she entered the cave of the 9 Nether, she suddenly found an extraordinary female ghost cultivator. She peeped into her fate and found that the future of this female ghost cultivator was unbelievable. This female ghost cultivator was destined to be helped by a benefactor, who would help her achieve an extraordinary future. She wanted to find out who her benefactor was, who could help her achieve such a great achievement, but she couldn't find out who that benefactor was. This was the 3rd person she couldn't divine as far as she could remember. That was why he gave the token of the underworld emperor to her after he had glimpsed a trace of the fate of the female ghost practitioner. He hoped that he could help her in the future so that they could form a good relationship. After she gave the token of the underworld emperor to the female ghost cultivator, she suddenly found that someone seemed to be watching her. She vaguely sensed that the person should be the benefactor of the female ghost cultivator, but she couldn't find out where he was. Now, hearing the scholar say that the token of the emperor of underworld she gave to the female ghost cultivator was in the hands of Yu Qianqiu, she suddenly realized something. Maybe the 3rd person whose fate she couldn't peek into didn't exist at all, but one of the 2 people she had met earlier. In this case, the benefactor in the female ghost cultivator's fate was about to be revealed. It should be Yu Qianqiu with a head full of braids. If he could help the female ghost cultivator achieve such a great achievement, wouldn't his future achievement be even higher? The veiled woman's eyes were full of surprise and doubt, and a hint of excitement flashed in them. She murmured, I finally found you. This veiled woman was none other than the saintess of the underworld who had met Yu Qianqiu in the human world. The scholar silently observed the expression on her face. Since the first time he saw her walk out of the boundless, mysterious, forbidden area, this was the first time he saw her calm face reveal excitement. This woman had always been meticulous in everything and had helped him greatly time and time again. Even when he and Jintai were able to escape from the heavenly tribulation in the human world, it was also because of her, otherwise, the two of them would definitely be dead. In addition, she had a mysterious identity of walking out of the boundless mysterious forbidden land, so the scholar didn't dare to look down on her and regarded her as a celestial being. It was the first time he saw her show such a rich expression. The scholar felt very uneasy in his heart while he was surprised, wondering what "I finally found you" meant. He couldn't help but ask, could it be that you are related to that Yu Chencho? The saintess of the underworld regained her composure and shook her head slightly. I have no relationship with him. I just met him once when I returned to the underworld and spoke a few words with him. She didn't say clearly whether it was before or after she returned to the netherworld, but the scholar took it as a matter of course that it was something that happened after she returned to the netherworld. He nodded slowly and said, you must have seen something about the person who could make you give him the token just by meeting him once. That's right, I remember the first time I saw this brat at the dragon transformation gate. He actually carried Li Guang's youngest son and leaped up the dragon gate, helping that little brat successfully transform into a dragon. Although that little brat succeeded because of himself, now that I think about it, I remember that the Netherworld River Black Carp clan always has a fated person when they leap through the dragon gate. To be able to become the fated person for the black carp to transform into a dragon, it must not be simple. There must be some karma involved. I've overlooked it. Help the Netherworld River Black Carp transform into a dragon. The saintess of the underworld was stunned. Yes. The scholar smiled and said, you don't really care about it, so I didn't mention it to you. Chapter 1047. Noble Person. The scholar was startled, and then he said with a faint smile, you used the word noble to describe him. I'm really surprised to hear such words coming out of your mouth. The saintess of underworld glanced at him, and then she grabbed the black sand from the silver urn and carefully sprinkled it on the ground in the yard. She quietly sprinkled handfuls after handfuls of black sand, but when the black sand fell to the ground, it made a rustling sound, breaking the silence. Seeing the saintess ignore him, the scholar smiled bitterly and looked behind him. He took a step back and sat on the knee-high corridor under the porch. He folded his bare feet and sat cross-legged by the grindstone with his hands on his knees, silently watching the saintess of underworld step back while sprinkling the black sand. He thought he was very patient and could wait for the saintess to finish the whole yard. However, she was so meticulous that he couldn't be fast. 2 hours later, not even half of the small courtyard was finished. The scholar couldn't help but rub his forehead helplessly. He found that his patient seemed to be unable to endure for even 2 hours. Moreover, it seemed that it would take at least another 2 hours. Compared to the long years that he had experienced, what was 1 to 4 hours worth of time? But now, it was unbelievable. He then sat under the eaves and muttered to himself, ever since I experienced that great battle in the human world, it was as if I was enlightened. Only then did I realize that the power of heaven is unpredictable. There seems to be a pair of heavenly eyes watching everything, and it's not something that we can contend against. In the long river of time, Bai Qi, am not the first emperor of the underworld to rule over the underworld, and I don't think I will be the last emperor of the underworld. I know this, so I, Bai Qi, don't hope to die with the world. Hearing this, the saintess of the underworld scattered a handful of black sand and looked back at him. She continued to do things that others couldn't understand and said coldly, since you've already seen through it, why do you still come here to nag at me? Don't tell me that you didn't come here to ask me about your fate this time. Hee hee. Although I don't want to die with heaven and earth, I don't want to end up in a miserable way. If my fate is destined to end in a miserable way, then why can't I, Bai Qi, fight against my fate? It is said that even ants are greedy for life. No matter how magnanimous I, Bai Qi, am, I am not immune. The scholar spoke slowly like an old monk in meditation. A firefly that was hanging upside down under the eaves fell down and fluttered lightly behind him. Suddenly, it landed on the millstone behind him. The flickering light was reflected back by the white jade wall, making the scholar who said that he was not immune to vulgarity seem somewhat extraordinary and refined. Sophistry. In the end, we're back to square one, the netherworld saintess said with a cold snort. Regardless of whether I'm being unreasonable or not, I'm telling the truth. There's no doubt about that. The scholar looked at her and smiled faintly. Why did you meet me when you came out of that place and not someone else? Why are you always in front of me? Isn't this fate? This should also be a part of my fate. Perhaps the heavens have already given me a chance to change my fate. Since there's already a solution in front of me, I, by chi, naturally have to fight for it. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to defying the heavens. Don't you think so? Then have you ever thought that perhaps my arrival is an important factor that allows you to walk towards your final fate? The netherworld saintess said faintly. As soon as these words came out, the scholar frowned and fell into deep thought. You and I have been together for so many years. Humans aren't grass or trees, we can't be emotionless. The masked woman, who was like a fairy scattering flowers, suddenly sighed lightly and said with some reluctance, "It's not that I don't want to tell you. It's my honor that the heavens allowed me to peep into the fate of others. However, they only allowed me to be a bystander and didn't give me the right to reveal the fate of others. Every time I peep into the fate of a person, I feel that there's a voice in the unseen world warning me that if I were to reveal the fate of others, I would definitely suffer the wrath of the heavens. My mother is a good example." Your mother? The scholar had a stunned look on his face as he looked at her in disbelief. In the past, he had asked her about her origins several times, but he didn't get a single reply. He didn't expect that she would actually mention her mother today. He couldn't help but be surprised as he said, "If that's the case, your mother can also peep into the fate of others like you. Why did you come out from there? What's in there exactly? Can't you tell me about your origins? This has nothing to do with you. Besides, it's my secret. I don't want to tell others so easily." The netherworld saintess scattered the black sand calmly. The scholar had already expected this. He shrugged his shoulders and suddenly, a faint light of wisdom flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "You were able to give the token to Yu Qianqiu. I wonder how noble this noble person you speak of is. I won't hide it from you. You must know that the unspeakably noble you speak of is unable to not move my heart. I wonder if his nobility can be beneficial to me." The netherworld saintess was taken aback and stopped what she was doing. She turned around and looked at him meaningfully as if she had thought of something. In fact, she had only given the token of the netherworld emperor to that female ghost cultivator, and she had never said that she had given the token to Yu Qianqiu. However, the owner of the token had mistakenly thought that she had given the token to Yu Qianqiu again and again. All these coincidences seemed to have reminded her of something all of a sudden, and she seemed to have peeped into something. She was lost in thought. The roulette of fate had never stopped its operation. It was mighty and irreversible, like the evolution of the endless stars in the universe. It was complicated and mysterious, and could only be described as the general trend. As a bystander, she could see a little bit of it, but she could only obey it. She didn't have the right to reverse it. If she tried to change something by force, it would be useless. Nobody could reverse the evolution of the endless stars in the universe. If she didn't follow the trend, she would be crushed into powder. Having figured this out, she didn't want to tell the scholar the truth that she hadn't given the token of the netherworld emperor to Yu Qianqiu. Seeing her in a daze, the scholar asked curiously, "What's wrong? Did I hit the nail on the head?" His eyes flickered. He was eager to know the answer, but he knew he couldn't force her, he could only look forward to it. The saintess of the underworld exhaled softly. The black veil covering half of her face fluttered slightly, and then she regained her calmness. She stopped her homework and walked to the scholar with the silver urn in her arms. She put the urn under the millstone, turned around and sat down with the scholar. They looked like a couple, but in fact, they weren't. The scholar was taken aback again, showing a rare expression. It was the first time he had sat so close to her. He couldn't help but tilt his head and look at her face rudely. She had a bright and full forehead full of wisdom, smoky eyebrows that looked like distant mountains, and a pair of bright eyes under her long eyelashes that were as calm as the autumn water, but sometimes they sparkled, as if she could see things that others couldn't. The black veil rested on the bridge of her nose, and the tempting lips under the black veil could be vaguely seen. I dare to bet that if you take off the black veil on your face, you will definitely be a rare beauty. The scholar snickered. The saintess of the underworld turned around and stared at him coldly. My father took off my mother's veil because he made a bet with someone. In the end, he died a horrible death and could never be reincarnated. Why? Do you want to give it a try? Ah. The scholar couldn't smile anymore. It was as if someone was strangling his neck, and he looked to the front in embarrassment. There are 3 types of people in this world whose fates I can't see. Firstly, I can't see my own fate. Secondly, there are almighty beings who can completely control their own fate. Thirdly, there are people whose fates are unpredictable and full of unpredictability. The saintess of the underworld suddenly said these words out of the blue. The scholar was taken aback, and then he said solemnly, there are people in this world who can completely control their own fate. Could they be experts from the immortal realm? The saintess of the underworld shook her head slightly and said, the so-called people who can completely control their own fate are not people who can get rid of all shackles and do whatever they want. The universe is vast and full of unknown changes. It is an eternal mystery that includes everything. It is right above our heads, silently watching our every move. It is the heavens that we speak of. All those who go against the heavens will be mercilessly crushed into powder. Therefore, there are almighty beings who want to follow its trajectory and follow the path it leads. They want to pursue immortality like the stars in the universe, and so this path is called the heavenly Tao. However, there are very few cultivators who can truly step on this path. But once they follow the footsteps of the heavenly Tao, their cultivation may advance by leaps and bounds, leaving everyone else in the dust. Those who step on the heavenly Tao will be brilliant and dazzling, and their fates are not something I can see. Of course, the heavenly Tao is hard to find, and it is extremely difficult to follow the footsteps of the heavenly Tao forever. We don't know where the end is, and we will most likely get lost on this long journey. I don't know if anyone can walk to the end. Heavenly Tao. The scholar gasped in awe. The vast domain that he had never touched suddenly appeared in front of him, and he suddenly felt so small. He couldn't help but raise his head to look at the pitch-black night sky. After a long time, he slowly let out a breath and said with a bitter smile, "You suddenly told me this. Could it be that you want to tell me that Yu Qianqiu is a person who has stepped on the heavenly Tao?" Him. No. The saintess of the underworld shook her head with certainty and said, he is the last of the 3 types of people I mentioned. His fate is unpredictable and full of variables. I want to peek at it, but I am dazzled. His fate gives me a messy feeling. True and false are mixed together, making me feel dizzy and uncomfortable, and even nauseous to the point of wanting to vomit. I can't sort it out at all, and I'm afraid that even he himself is at a loss and is messing around without knowing why. Chapter 1048. Ah. The scholar nodded his head in amazement. To think that someone can have such a fate. It's not an exaggeration to say that fate is unpredictable and full of variables. But then again, it must be extremely rare for someone to have such a fate. Can we say that this is a person with a special fate? The netherworld saintess nodded her head and said, there is a saying that this kind of person is someone who makes a living in the cracks of the heavenly Tao. It is equivalent to giving him a different path from ordinary people and letting him live or die on his own. It's just a matter of whether he can walk to the end. It is unknown whether this kind of person is favored by the heavenly Tao or abandoned by the heavenly Tao. No one can say for sure what is going on. It is precisely because of this that it is full of variables. The scholar didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "But you gave the token to such a person. According to what you said, how can he be considered a noble person? Could it be that you want to see if he can walk to the end?" The netherworld saintess thought for a while and didn't reveal that she didn't give the token to Yu Qianqiu. She only said indifferently, "I am just saying. Whether he is a noble person or not is relative. I am just guessing if someone like him, who makes a living in the cracks of the heavenly Tao, can pull some people whose fate is already fixed to another fork in the road of fate." The smile on the scholar's face gradually froze. He squinted his eyes at her and said, "You are saying that he can change my fate." He suddenly faintly guessed that the reason why she said these words to him for the first time was to tell him that his fate would not be any better in the future. As for Yu Qianqiu, because he lived in the cracks of the heavenly Tao, because he had no fate to speak of, he could not abide by the rules of the game. He could do things that others could not, such as changing the fate of others. Although he didn't know if the fate he changed was good or bad, as she said, it was only relative whether he was a noble person or not. Therefore, he deduced that those who were bad to Yu Qianqiu would naturally return the favor. Those who were good to Yu Qianqiu would naturally receive the corresponding retribution. This was the difference between good and bad. Otherwise, why would she give her token to Yu Qianqiu? There was a suspicion that he was trying to express his goodwill. Smart people would often think that they had seen through the propositions, but they would often be fooled by their own cleverness. As for whether it was good or bad, only time would tell. At the very least, that was what the scholar was certain of at the moment. The saintess of the underworld abruptly stood up and turned around to pick up the silver urn. Frowning, she said, "I've already told you that I can't peek into his fate. This is your own wild guess. All right. You've been bothering me for a long time. It's time to go." The scholar put down his leg and stood up as well. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but when he thought about the other party's habits and temper, he knew that it would be futile to ask anything else since she had already asked him to leave. Immediately, he moved to the outside of the wall in a flash. Seeing that she was doing that boring thing again, he couldn't help but shake his head and leave. Strolling along the small path in the forest, the scholar raised his head and lowered his head from time to time. His feet were bare, and he seemed to be thinking about something while sighing. Unknowingly, he had returned to the side of his pavilion. Then, he turned around and looked in the direction he had just come from. His gaze became firm as he quickly walked back into the pavilion. When he arrived at the window upstairs, he rhythmically knocked on the windowsill. A silver light flashed, and 1,000 silver-armored soldiers appeared outside the window, waiting for orders. The scholar muttered to himself as he slowly ordered, "Immediately investigate the whereabouts of Yu Qianqiu. Report back to me as soon as possible." The silver-armored soldiers were startled for a moment. Then, they immediately cupped their fists and said, "Yes." Then, they disappeared in a flash. Just when the scholar was about to sit back on the rocking chair, a ray of golden light pierced through the night sky and instantly reached the window. A dignified man dressed in an exceptionally gorgeous golden robe appeared. His slender eyes flickered as he glanced at the rocking chair by the window. Then, he opened his thin lips and said, "Bai Qi, you seem to be living a leisurely and carefree life. How can I be as leisurely and carefree as you? It's dark here, and there are a lot of people who don't listen to me. Unlike you in the beautiful and colorful immortal realm, where no one dares to disobey your orders." The scholar placed his hands behind his back and revealed an arrogant expression as he mocked, "Jin Tai, you don't come without a reason. Speak. What do you want from me this time? It turned out that this sudden visitor was the Supreme Emperor of the immortal realm, Jin Tai. One was the Supreme Emperor of the underworld, and the other was the Supreme Emperor of the immortal realm. The scene of the two meeting was not something that ordinary people could see. It's a meeting between old friends, no need to be so harsh. Jin Tai said with an expressionless face, "When you came to my immortal palace, I welcomed you with open arms. How can I block a guest outside the window like you did?" The scholar snorted coldly, but he still turned around and left with his hands clasped behind his back, opening up the window. Jin Tai teleported and appeared inside the window. Like an indescribably noble emperor, he slowly and majestically paced around the pavilion, examining the furnishings inside. He shook his head slightly and said, "It's still those rotten things, old-fashioned furnishings. As the Supreme Emperor of the underworld, why do you have to live such a simple life? No matter how simple and plain you are, in the eyes of others, you are still the Emperor of the underworld, by Qi, who slaughtered millions of living beings in the underworld. No one will say anything good about you. A king should act like a king, and you can't lower yourself. A rotten thing." The scholar waved his hand disdainfully, revealing an unreasonable look as he said, "Don't tell me that everyone has to be like you, sitting on a golden lump, lying on a golden lump, even sharing a bed with a woman is on a golden lump. Aren't you bored out of your mind? A tasteless guy like you doesn't deserve to point fingers in front of me. Of course, it's a little simple, but it can't be compared to you. Every day, there are a lot of people singing your praises in your ears, and there are groups of beautiful singers surrounding you to serve you. You live like a local tyrant in the world. I really admire you. Groups of beautiful singers surrounding me, but they can't be compared to you. You have a beautiful woman like Hei Qi to serve you. Why don't we change our tastes? I'll give you a group of beautiful singers, and you give me Hei Qi a group of beautiful singers for you. You won't lose anything." Jin Tai clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the complicated files on the shelf. Although he was joking, his expression and tone were still harsh and cold. It seemed like he was not born to joke. "Do you think everyone is as perverted as you?" The scholar rolled his eyes and suddenly sneered, "It's not that I can't change it. I don't need those rotten things that you have been spoiling and trusting. However, I am a little interested in Ji Wu. Why don't you give Ji Wu to me, and I give you Hei Qi? What do you think?" Hearing this, Jin Tai slowly turned around and stared at the scholar for a while. Then, he nodded, "All right, but not now. When I'm tired of playing with her, I'll change my tastes with you." If someone were to hear that the exalts of the immortal world and the exalts of the netherworld were actually discussing such a dirty deal, what would they think? They would probably feel ashamed of their own inferiority since they could even exchange their own women at any time. Especially Ji Wu, who was about to be married. If she knew about this conversation, how would she endure it? The scholar's mouth twitched and revealed a defeated expression. He waved his hand and said, "No wonder even your name has the word Tai in it. You are simply a natural pervert. Speak. What do you want from me?" "Nothing, I just suddenly wanted to see you." Jin Tai met the other party's sarcastic gaze and said without a change in expression, "There's something I don't understand. How could a lowly pawn of my immortal world receive the favor of a dignified netherworld emperor like you and even give him the netherworld emperor's token? You didn't even give it to that woman Hei Qi. Also, the army of Onyx and that person from the immortal world called Mu Bing worked together to kill that pawn. Why do I feel that this matter is a bit strange? He is also a small character, so how could he mobilize the army of Onyx? Is it related to my external affairs commander? This happened in your territory, and with your influence, don't tell me you didn't investigate the inside story. You and I have an agreement. In order to maintain our respective rule over the two worlds, we must exchange what we need. So, I hope you can be honest with me. The scholar looked at him with a smile, but countless thoughts were running through his mind. This fellow was cunning and vicious, and could even be said to be inhumane. He had already experienced this before. Some things could be said, but there were also things he absolutely couldn't let the scholar know. The theory of fate involving the saintess of the underworld naturally couldn't be leaked. Otherwise, only the heavens knew what would happen. What are you laughing at? Could it be that you're behind this? Jean Tai's slender eyes narrowed into slits, flashing with a cold light like that of a venomous snake. I just find it strange. With your arrogant eyes, why would you pick a pawn like Yu Qianqiu to make a song? You even specially issued a decree, so how could I not be interested? The scholar sighed. It just so happened that I met that brat at the dragon transformation gate. I looked at him from left to right in the dark and felt that it wasn't your style. Since you, immortal Emperor Jean Tai, wanted to praise him, how could I, Bai Qi, stay idle? Thus, I asked someone to secretly give him a token. However, I reckon that even he didn't know that it was my Emperor of the Underworld's token. When he took it out, he was probably dumbfounded. Hee hee. It just so happens that I'm also bored. I want to see how that brat will behave in the future. After giving a bunch of reasons, he added in his mind, surnamed you brat, I spent a lot of effort to help you, so you should be thanking me in the future. Otherwise, with this old fox's viciousness, you'll be dead for sure. So that's what happened. Jean Tai's slender eyes slowly opened. He believed what the scholar said. With the other party's usual style of arguing with him, it wasn't strange for him to do such a thing. It would be strange if he didn't ask about it. He coldly snorted, ridiculous. Only someone like you, who doesn't care about your status, would do such a ridiculous thing. As for why I asked him to compose a song, you don't need to be suspicious. There's nothing shameful about it. First, Ji Wu took a fancy to the song he composed. Second, I heard that the song he composed had an unusual flavor, so I could use it. As for after this, if he can display his talents to please me, I'll keep him if he's useful. If he's useless, someone will naturally take care of him. He's not worth worrying about. Let's talk about my second question. What have you found on your side? You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.